Dungeon Hunter. Chapters 201 to 222. Chapter 201. Meeting the Messengers. In front of Greenland's dungeon, a white knight was guarding the dungeon door. However, Oswin and Chrisley could see that it wasn't a simple opponent. The flow of magic power was strange and it smelled like a type of incense. It was clearly a high-class creature. Who? A loud and beautiful female voice emerged from the helmet. The knight guarding the dungeon door was a pure white woman covered in snow. Oswin tried to step forward, but Chrisley was faster. "We are messengers from Grand Duke Randolph Brigzeal and have come with an invitation for Grand Duke Ariel Diablo." Randolph Brigzeal. I have heard that name before. The white knight nodded, but the atmosphere didn't seem very positive. A hostile feeling was directed towards them. Chrisley ignored it and said, "If you know, then open the door. We don't want to fight." "No. To cross this door, you have to prove your qualifications. Grand Duke Ariel won't meet with just anyone. We are here at the command of Grand Duke Randolph Brigzeal. I will listen to weapons, man and woman." The white knight took out a rapier. A desire not to let them pass was coming from her. Chrisley turned and looked at Oswin, who nodded bitterly. He couldn't gauge the opponent, but she didn't seem that easy. No, Oswin and Chrisley were both equivalent to high-class creatures. In particular, Oswin had a long and unimaginable experience. Now that his 6 arms were restored and his weapons were stronger, he could face the white knight. He was confident about fighting the opponent. Oswin pulled out his 6 swords and said, "I will do as you requested." The moment the knight's rapier headed towards him, it disappeared. In the blink of an eye, the rapier had reached Oswin. Swak, but it was shallow. Oswin was somewhat surprised, but his body wasn't. His body had reacted first and avoided the rapier. But even though he avoided it, Oswin had a headache. It was due to the differences. He couldn't say the knight was weak. It won't be easy. Still, he would win. Oswin didn't think otherwise. The number of those stronger than him in the underground world could be counted on one hand. The white knight wasn't one of those stronger than him. Choo choo chuck. Oswin overlapped his 6 swords. The rapier was blocked. I can't be a crazy bull. He couldn't rush recklessly. The knight was lacking power compared to her speed. There wasn't a strong sense of balance. However, small attacks became stronger when overlapped. The white knight used small gaps to push Oswin. Even a small gap could break a huge rock. "I must look very funny to you." Oswin was originally a blacksmith. And a blacksmith had surprisingly high ambitions. If he didn't feel intense obsession for the sword, then he wouldn't have created masterpieces. The same was true even now. At least, he wanted to be acknowledged by his opponent. The temperament of a strong winner rose. He was attacking. He had confidence that his actions wouldn't be disparaged. Hell, after regaining his ego, Oswin made 6 swords. He used the iron of the gods received from Dungeon Master to set up 6 pillars that represented hell. The name was Hell, and after its completion, a skill popped into his head. The 6 swords would fire out hellfire when they were overlapped. The hellfire swallowed up Oswin and became one with him. Soon it was like a fierce lion had emerged from hell. The white knight paused in her attacks. She started to intensely concentrate on the rapier. It was an attack that concentrated all her destructive power on one point. Oswin recognized it immediately. It would be better to avoid it, but he knew that dragging this out too long wouldn't be good. So he would hang it on this one strike. Both of them were confident about their attacks. Soon the two of them started to rush towards each other. As Oswin moved his feet, black fire spread in a manner reminiscent of hell. In contrast, the white knight's magic power gathered on the rapier shot forward like a projectile. And, just as they were about to hit each other, Keng, Ching, the sword and rapier flew away. Stop. A snow-covered island. A woman left footsteps in this place. A demon with colorful goat horns on her forehead that contrasted with her pale eyes. The appearance of Ariel Diablo. Ariel stood before everyone with an expressionless face. Although she didn't seem like she was going to harm Oswin and Chrisley, they had no idea what she was thinking. Even her words were ambiguous. They could only follow her quietly. The dungeon that they entered was calm. There didn't seem to be any creatures. She had forcibly occupied this place, so it wasn't surprising. The friendly atmosphere made it seem even more hostile. In particular, Oswin was shocked that his attack had been blocked. If it was just blocked, then he wouldn't have been so surprised. However, if this had been a battlefield, then his head would have flown away. You were sent by Randolph Brigseal? After stepping on a magic circle, Ariel opened her mouth for the first time. That's right. We are here to pass on Grand Duke Randolph Brigseal's invitation. Those are long words. She only wanted to check that one thing. She activated the magic circle with a casual gesture. A bright light shone and a small crack was opened. Once the light disappeared, everyone was in an entirely different space. At the same time, Oswin and Chrisley were quite surprised. White knights. There were at least 20 white knights lined up in 2 columns. Their sizes were all different. Their identities couldn't be identified due to the armor completely covering their bodies, but some seemed to be young children. It was obvious that the white knight guarding the entrance was an older model. Their strength couldn't be easily measured. Even if they weren't high class, at the very minimum they were advanced class. You've come back, Ariel Diablo. Set the table. Guests have come, so we have to treat them. Yes. Soon afterwards, Oswin and Chrisley were seated at a huge table. A white knight guided the two of them in an orderly manner. Oswin and Chrisley couldn't open their mouths as food came out. They needed to grasp Ariel Diablo's intentions. But they couldn't read through her. You seem to be confused. Ariel had a small smile on her face. This was the composure of the strong. Confidence and freedom were in every gesture. She had an atmosphere around her that they would never be able to acquire. Since birth. It was possible since she had been born with the blood of a demon king. Oswin was well aware of this. He knew of only one other person like this. The Hell Monarch. Randolph Brigseal has something to tell me? Here. Oswin restrained her when Chrisley tried to come forward. Chrisley was still weak at handling things like this. It was impossible for her to deal with a strong powerhouse. He had wanted to give her a chance until he saw Ariel. Ariel Diablo wasn't someone who would overlook a lot. Maybe, Oswin's instincts shouted that she was more dangerous than Upa. Ariel accepted the invitation and started to read it. Unlike Upa, she showed no signs of irritation. She just read the contents of the invitation with very interested eyes. It didn't take long. After 30 seconds, Ariel glanced at Oswin. This is very interesting. Are you giving invitations to the other Grand Dukes? Yes. If he mentioned that he met Upa first, then Ariel might take it the wrong way. Ariel knocked lightly on the table at Oswin's words. It is unprecedented. After the Demon King disappeared without a successor, there has never been a gathering of Grand Dukes. Yet the one who occupied Okuyo's position as Grand Duke has convened all his enemies together. Ariel seemed very excited. She was at war with Upa, but Chrisley and Oswin were surprised by the completely different reaction. Her attitude was like she didn't even care about Upa. The food will cool. Come on. It was made specially for you. She certainly wasn't hostile, but they still felt uneasy. Oswin and Chrisley picked up the knife and fork. It was the beginning of a very quiet and long meal. Once out of the dungeon, Oswin sighed. She is a woman with no gaps. She was the daughter of a demon king? Indeed, those knights. They seemed to be a blend of things. Then Chrisley opened her mouth. It seemed like she had been paying more attention to the knights around Ariel. They aren't ordinary. They definitely feel strange. I don't know what the mixture is. Maybe those knights are Ariel Diablo's strongest weapons. Upa has tamed the magician of the moon. Our dungeon master has to deal with such monsters, so it won't be easy. Oswin clicked his tongue. The Grand Dukes were all playing games. It was highly likely that Pandemonium also had something. Let's finish it quickly and return. There are too many things to tell Dungeon Master. Now there is only one place left. Let's go. The two people quickly got on the griffin and flew away. I heard Oswin and Chrisley's report and started pacing around the dungeon core. The contents of the meeting with Upa, Ariel and Pandemonium were unexpected. What made them change? Upa, Ariel and Pandemonium were each hiding something. Ariel hadn't openly revealed it, but it was still too soon. If they had just increased the number of creatures like they originally did, it would have been a power struggle. Okulos. It seemed like they had changed plans due to Okulos. Okulos had warned all the Grand Dukes after breaking the taboo. He died by my hands, but the effect he caused wasn't dead yet. Maybe it wouldn't be strange for another Grand Duke to break a taboo. Furthermore, Ariel had subdued Oswin at once. I had checked her status window at the auction, but it seemed like she had been working hard. Even if he was caught off guard, Oswin was a high-class creature. He should have noticed and been able to act. Things were changing very quickly. I was as well, but the winner will be me. The word, winner, was sweet. The confident words emerged from my mouth. They were changing, but their speed didn't reach mine. Even though I was alone, I had the power to deal with them. I didn't think Ariel would raise such strange things. Ariel's knights. Although the qualities of a demon couldn't be removed, she was still the demon with the most integrity. Yet she had created something like the White Knights. I was told that a few things were mixed together to make them, but I couldn't understand their identities. She wasn't an expert in alchemy, so I didn't know how she made them. This meeting will be quite interesting. One thing was for certain, it would be a place of indirect fighting. There would be no deterrence like at the Demon World auction. There was no penalty. If they wanted to fight, then they would fight. A huge wave, hail, overturning the world. No one could stop it. I honestly hadn't expected it would become so large when I first thought about it. It might be a disaster for humans, but now no one could stop the changes. It was the same for the demons. Even if a god appeared, would mediation be possible? I need to make the final preparations. My hands itched at the thought of seeing them all in one place. Only 5 years. But for me, it had already been decades. Those who would laugh and those who would cry. I smiled and moved from my spot. Chapter 202 to 205, Greenwich Observatory. Greenwich Observatory, London, United Kingdom. Humans called this place the center of the world. It was the place where the meeting would occur. I moved quickly and arrived there first. I had sent the invitation, so I needed to decorate it. However, there were too many people around. Of course, I decided what to do. There was extreme confusion the moment that Gigantes and the Hydra appeared. The humans couldn't resist the strong creatures and fled. Even so, there were those who remained. For the humans left, I only said one word coldly. Trample. I stood on top of the observatory and looked around. A serene atmosphere. Just a few hours ago, it was a place packed with humans. There are those already watching. Unlike the tranquil atmosphere, there were many eyes watching this place. Pandemonium's creatures. Most of Asia and Europe were Pandemonium's domain. The meeting would take place in his area, so his creatures were the first to arrive. Is it really okay with these numbers? It's okay. Chrisley had spoken in a worried voice, but I declined firmly. A low number of creatures had come here. They didn't exceed 100. The Grand Dukes would have hundreds or thousands of creatures, maybe more than that. I couldn't afford to worry about it. The reason was simple. The bigger they are, the more damage that will be received. The Grand Dukes were gathering. An unprecedented situation. It was impossible for it to end without any problems. Everyone knew it and were prepared. Of course, bringing more creatures meant a higher chance of losing them in the chaos. Besides, I didn't intend this meeting of Grand Dukes to be that simple. My dungeon master, at least allow me to install a magic circle. Chrisley was worried. I had already disappeared once, and this was a place where all the Grand Dukes were gathering. Pandemonium is someone experienced with magic. If there is a magic circle, then he will instantly identify it and nullify it. There is no need to cause a misunderstanding by installing it. It wasn't well known, but Upa was also quite perceptive. Chrisley wouldn't be able to deceive the vigilant demons with her skills. I understand. Chrisley stepped back. I didn't scold her. I didn't know it before, but it wasn't bad to have someone worried about me. It was awkward but felt good. There is still time. The meeting would occur in a few days. I hadn't come here a few days early for simple cleanup. I started moving and Chrisley hurriedly asked, "My dungeon master, where are you going?" Buckingham Palace. They should have gathered by now. I smiled coldly and moved. Buckingham Palace, United Kingdom. A very iconic place in the United Kingdom that was the Queen's residence. Since the British Prime Minister died in a monster wave, she was handling most of the work. There was a space to conduct business. A meeting at Buckingham Palace would only occur when something special happened. The Greenwich Observatory has been occupied by creatures. Talk. Queen Mary struck the desk after receiving the report of the army chief. The report has already been received. And, I don't want a report from you but a future solution. The creatures are at the center of the world. The problem was the monsters. If they were just monsters, then this meeting wouldn't have been convened. However, there were true monsters who occupied the top rankings. The sweaty army chief opened his mouth. An all-out? Stop. It isn't at a level that ordinary armies can deal with. What about the awakened unit? How is their performance right now, Lieutenant General Carls? The mentioned Lieutenant General Carls stepped forward. They can destroy any army. Even if the opponent has the best creatures, our White Lion unit can deal with them. Ma'am, how dependable? Do you want this task? Your Majesty, placing unverified awakened into this position. The Navy Admiral protested, but Queen Mary was firm. She was only looking at Carls. The regular military forces had already been defeated several times. Numerous governments tried to nurture awakened but often failed. Once humans gained strength, they weren't easily controlled. But Carls was a top-level awakened. There were no other awakened gathered here except for Carls. He had never failed in any missions and his patriotism towards England was very high. Queen Mary had high expectations for him. Lieutenant General Carls, can I see them? Of course, Your Majesty. So I would love to see them. Carls hit the floor a few times. Then it seemed like his task was over. Question marks appeared above everyone's head. Was it after 30 seconds? What? A light came pouring out of the floor of the conference room. As everyone's eyes except for Carls widened, the light formed a hole and 30 warriors appeared through that hole. They stood in an orderly manner and bowed to Queen Mary. They are the warriors of the White Lion unit. All? No, they are more like friends. Carls laughed heartily. He showed off a confident figure. The 30 people that appeared here gave off greater presences than anyone else in the room. Except for Carls. They appeared through the floor. There was no record of them ever visiting Buckingham Palace. In other words, there were no constraints on where they could go. Are they capable of destroying the monsters at Greenwich Observatory? Doing it all at once will be hard. But it is possible to remove them one by one. Anyway, there are approximately 100 creatures gathered at Greenwich Observatory. 3 days. Just give me 3 days, Your Majesty. It was definitely tempting. They couldn't be sure what would happen if powerful creatures were provoked. However, they intended to handle them quietly, one by one. Then you will irritate the creatures. Wouldn't it better to handle them all at once? The army chief came forward. It was a good point. There was a chance their actions could provoke the creatures. A stalemate. Please choose wisely. It would be a problem if the creatures spread out through the United Kingdom. There would be casualties all over the place and buildings would be ruined. There was no guarantee that everyone would be safe. The United Kingdom wasn't as risky as the other parts of the world. The awakened had quite high levels and the army itself could hunt some creatures. Over the last 5 years, they had analyzed the creatures more than any other country. There are many awakened in the army. The ones escorted to Buckingham Palace are the true warriors of the White Lion unit. Wouldn't it be better for 30 people to handle it? The rest of the world won't be able to laugh if we succeed. They were good words. If they could handle it, then they would become pretty credible. Lieutenant General Carl's face was full of confidence. True warriors. Isn't it too early to shout out something like that? Some of the military officials scoffed as they looked at Carls. But it was definitely quiet. It was strangely quiet. They couldn't even hear themselves breathing. Everyone here was extensively trained. They could hear a heartbeat even if it was a little distance away. However, they couldn't hear anything. What was going on? Just before they were about to ask. Keek. The door opened and 20 new people appeared. One of them was dragging a fallen soldier while another one was chewing gum. Unlike the previous 30 people, most of them didn't have good attitudes. Let me introduce the last of the White Lion troops. My friends are somewhat rough but their skills are excellent. What are you trying to do, Lieutenant General Carls? All the military officials were furious. Fighting in the sacred Buckingham Palace. Furthermore, it seemed like all the guards had been taken care of. It was enough to be called a traitor. However, Queen Mary didn't mind. Great skills. I didn't hear anything. They are great friends. How about it, Your Majesty? If you give me 3 days, then I will clean up the creatures. Were the guards killed? They are a little rough, but they won't kill anyone without my command. They are only stunned. Okay, then I will leave this mission entirely to Lieutenant General Carls. Queen Mary readily accepted. It was a serious matter, but it was an excellent way to show the power of the White Lion unit. Thanks to that, all the others had red faces but couldn't say anything. Times had changed. Power was everything. The stronger the power, the better. Carls smiled and shook Queen Mary's hand. If this mission was cleared up, then there would be no more obstacles in the United Kingdom. There would be no more interference every time the unit tried to do something. He imagined a bright future as he shook her hand. 3 days might not be enough. Carls hurried in front of Queen Mary and turned towards the voice. The White Lion unit also reacted. The window above. A man with a pale face and dressed in a suit who had been sitting on the window sill jumped down. They hadn't noticed him. Nobody in here. Carl's body stiffened. Among the awakened here, he was acclaimed as the strongest. He was from the United Kingdom, but his fame had spread throughout the world. He could handle a great number of advanced creatures alone, and he could sense them to some extent. But this happened. He hadn't known. He didn't feel anything. It was ominous. The White Lion troops quickly surrounded the man. They were ready to cast skills and destroy him. There was a total of 50 White Lion troops in Carl's, making them able to deal with a high-class creature. They were even confident about handling demons. Even if that man entered here unnoticed, he wouldn't be able to escape. Keep this in mind. Anyone who attacks me will die. The man chuckled slightly. It wasn't a false cynicism. He had an infinite amount of confidence. No, his expression showed no worries at all. He ignored the White Lion troops. They had only been formed a few years ago, but the White Lion troops were elites that had personally been chosen by Carls. Every day was life and death training, so they had a lot of pride. They were truly the best in the world. They were the strongest unit of Awakened. Was I scared? Originally, he would have attacked as soon as the enemy was discovered. Carls was someone willing to cause turmoil in the sacred Buckingham Palace. But he was frozen. He couldn't make a decision. It was because the man said that anyone who attacked him would die. You are moderately strong for humans. The man glanced at all the unit members. Then he laughed. It was a look full of ridicule. You are lacking. The creatures will destroy Greenwich Observatory within 3 days. I guarantee that all of you will die within 3 minutes. Crazy bastard. There were 20 members who hadn't been fully trained. They were good but had problems with their attitudes. Therefore, they were normally placed in the rear. But they were very proud that they belonged to the White Lion unit. Now that pride was stepped on by a man that they hadn't even heard of. The first 30 people didn't move without Carl's command. The other 20 people rebelled. Sayuk. A small crack of light appeared behind the man. One of the soldiers had opened a crack. The soldier appeared inside the crack and prepared to stab the man in the back. Quarurum. Thunder struck, or at least it seemed like that. The soldier turned to ash as his sword fell to the ground. The man didn't even care. Waruruk. Instead, flames appeared behind the man. The flames wrapped around the entire room. They felt, if now, an overwhelming magic power, a fearsome presence. Carls felt like he was falling into an abyss as he found it difficult to breathe. Chiok. Chiok. The White Lion unit quickly prepared to attack. They instinctively moved despite not hearing a command. Kuik. The members moved back. Among them, 3 members caught on fire. Despite using recovery or water skills, the flames never died out. They wouldn't be extinguished until the victim's life was completely gone. Dubuk. Dubuk. The man walked forward. Some of the members ran forward, but they were just like moths flying into a fire. Just like moths, they burned up. The difference was too big. The man ignored everything. The White Lion unit members had never felt such a large difference before. They had managed to defeat every creature and demon they encountered. Lieutenant General Carls opened his mouth. Stop. Sweat flowed down his body. His back was already wet. It was the first time he had felt like this. Captain, we were handpicked. The members were still filled with desire to fight, but Carls shook his head. You can't do anything. He was sure of it. That man was a monster. Someone on an entirely different dimension from the other creatures. The world had changed. Demons. They invaded Earth with their creatures. The giant dungeons were their bases. Only the brave would be able to attack them. Carls knew exactly how to distinguish between them. This man was far beyond them. The location especially wasn't good. It didn't matter if they died as long as Queen Mary was protected. She was the symbol of the United Kingdom. The spiritual support of all citizens. If she died, then the United Kingdom would collapse. All the citizens would lose hope. There was no future for a country without hope. Gulp. Carls swallowed his saliva and spoke. You? Who are you? Why did you come here? His black eyes were dispassionate and his footsteps sounded heavy. The man laughed. It seemed like he thought everything was ridiculous. Carl's blocking Queen Mary's view was impolite behavior, but soon the man opened his mouth. I am one of the 4 Grand Dukes. Randolph, I have come to pass on both despair and hope to you. Grand Duke, Lieutenant Carls moaned. It wasn't the first time he heard the words, Grand Duke. He had more information than others. In particular, he knew quite a lot of secrets about the demons. He was aware that each of the 72 dungeons was managed by a demon and they each had a rank. The Grand Dukes were at the very top, the demons above the other demons. Officially, only Ariel Diablo had revealed herself as a Grand Duke. She revealed her name to the world while leading a massive invasion, so every country leader knew the name Ariel Diablo. Her power was amazing. None of the humans could stop Ariel Diablo. Even the arrogant Templar Knights had to give up fighting. An unofficial awakened organization, in the past, they had been just as famous as the Freemasons and Illuminati. Carls was confident that their power was no less than his units. However, they had prematurely went against a Grand Duke. It was okay if they attacked a demon who was a baron, but a Grand Duke was an entirely different thing. Their power was completely lacking. Despair and hope? Do you mean to give us Pandora's box? But he hid it. It was like showing no fear in front of a wild beast. Then he would look for the slightest ray of hope. However, the opponent was too good. The man had eyes like a snake. It felt like he could see through everything. You can't win. Short words. Carls understood what he meant. In other words, he was speaking about all humans. Humans couldn't beat demons. The man's voice was full of confidence. It was like he was speaking the absolute truth. Lieutenant General Carls didn't answer. He didn't know if it was due to a Grand Duke's presence or the absolute confidence. I will give you a chance. A chance? Demons will gather at Greenwich Observatory. That includes me, the other 3 Grand Dukes, the demons they lead and their creatures. This is the only chance for the human race to win. Carls and the others' eyes widened. Everybody would be gathered in one place. Demons and their creatures were very tricky. If they were gathered in one place, then it was possible to try modern weapons. There had been cases where advanced creatures had been killed by nukes. Why are you giving us this information? On the contrary, it might be a trap by the demons. Pasic, the man scoffed. Humans have only been holding onto life for one reason: competition. If the demons weren't competing with each other, then the humans would have already been destroyed. Was it really like that? It wasn't likely. After the massive offensive of the demons began, humanity couldn't fight back properly. Important bases were lost and modern science became useless. Thousands of jet fighters had turned into piles of junk. There was only merciless slaughter. Carls wanted to tell him not to joke around. But at that moment, the man's eyes stared at him. Think carefully. The man disappeared like the wind, leaving only those words behind. However, a large amount of items poured out as the man left. Glowing stones, cores. When hunting in the dungeon, there was a 0.001% chance of obtaining an advanced core. But all the cores here were advanced or high class. The amount here could produce countless weapons with powerful magic spells. There could even be some unique grade weapons. If they were lucky, epic grade items might emerge. I don't understand his intentions. Carls sighed and said with a frown. That man was holding out an apple. However, there was a chance that the apple could be poisoned. He was a demon, but it would be a great opportunity if his words were true. What should we do? Carls and everyone else gathered there were deep in thought. In the meantime, a woman was gazing at the window with a calm expression. Britain's ruler and hope, Queen Mary's eyes weren't dead yet. Therefore Carls felt a ray of hope. Anyway, she was the only one who had the authority to make the decision. If this wasn't an emergency, then what would be called an emergency situation? It was indeed a serious emergency. Leaders from each country were gathered. It was accomplished in only a few days. Normally such a complex procedure would take a long time. However, the issue was significant. Many people wanted to join this meeting and powerful but unofficial groups participated. The Builder Bug Club, Triangular Committee, the Triad and the Mafia. The Templar Knights, Freemasons and Illuminati also made a statement for the first time. They declared their existence and gathered attention. They were 3 organizations completely obscured by secrecy that revealed themselves. whether that would happen again in the future. Every country was heading towards the United Kingdom due to the event happening at Greenwich Observatory. The meeting proceeded strictly. Queen Mary and Lieutenant General Carls were sitting at a long round table with other major members having seats. Are you trying to imitate the Knights of the Round Table? The Mafia godfather Don Gullinam laughed. His position was very far from Queen Mary and the Triad members were sitting near him. In contrast, the Templar Knights, the Freemasons and the Illuminati were given seats close to Queen Mary. Don Gullinam had no choice but to be in this position. The bad groups were isolated. Even when the world was like this, they were still obsessed with past faults. Don Gullinam scoffed at Queen Mary's foolishness. It must be hard to get up with such a heavy rear. The Triad leader, Li Chao Shang. He didn't even turn his head as he spoke to Gullinam. No, Don Gullinam thought that he seemed to be trying to say something. It was because there was no one else around except for him. The smell of food is too good. It is something I can't live without. Don Gullinam laughed, revealing all gold teeth. That's right, materialism, a capitalist society, and those who controlled the world with gold had their power weakened. Now the armed forces were the best in the world. At this meeting, Don Gullinam was convinced that something would happen to change the world's landscape. The number of people who participated was great. It was difficult to tell the influence of the 100 people gathered here. Snob, I have been worried about a man. Is he a demonic Grand Duke? Li Chao Shang nodded his head. This meeting and the main subject. It was to discuss the emergence of the Grand Duke and what would happen at Greenwich Observatory. Li Chao Shang spoke like he was talking to himself. It wasn't long after the dungeons appeared. My brother Lei Feng and mercenaries from other countries cooperated to attack the Korean dungeon that was known to contain treasures. Everyone was wiped out. No, I thought they were all wiped out. Any survivors? One. A mercenary from the United States survived. His whole body was injured and his mind wasn't normal. I got some decent prosthetics for him and had him accompany me. Ah, that ignorant-looking man behind you. Don Gullinam moved his gaze. A man with a steel arm and leg was standing firmly behind Li Chao Shang. His chicken hair was prominent, but he must have been very skilled to be a guard. However, he didn't look normal as he kept on drooling. He responded to the face drawn in the invitation. Queen Mary had sent an image along with the invitation. The image of a burning man. It seemed like the chicken-haired man had remembered that man. Then, that Grand Duke, it is very likely that he is in charge of Korea's dungeon. North Korea? South Korea? Don Gullinam stroked his chin. Korea, the location of a Grand Duke was identified. Great information. Maybe he could use that as a weapon in this meeting. Li Chao Shang handing this information to him, it was obvious. It was to join forces. In this meeting of world leaders, it was essential to distinguish between friend and foe. Don Gullinam knocked his shoulder against Li Chao Shang. The result was an implicit alliance. Not long after they were all seated, Queen Mary cleared her throat. For those who have gathered here, thank you for coming such a long way. Queen Mary smiled gently. Don Gullinam thought her smile was smarmy. He knew that Queen Mary had absolute support in England but wasn't sure of the reason. This meeting is taking place to determine humanity's future. It is a great opportunity to remove the cancer infecting this world. Greenwich Observatory. Something big was happening there. That was the only thing written on the invitation. Can we really get rid of the creatures? The President of the United States asked. Queen Mary shook his head. It isn't the creatures. Don't you know? It is the presence of the demons. Then, the demons will gather. The eyes of the awakened widened. The only ones who didn't react were the three mysterious groups, including the Templar Knights. Are they humans? Don Gullinam clicked his tongue. Those in the three groups never even changed their expressions. They were really bland humans. He even wanted to call them robots. Then the President of Russia opened his mouth. Where did you get that information? From now on, I want everybody to keep this secret. There is no time, Queen Mary warned. Everybody nodded, so she continued. The man in the invitation told me directly. He referred to himself as a Grand Duke. Are you confident about that? After seeing his ominous power, I am sure that he is a Grand Duke. Even Lieutenant General Carls gave up when he saw the enemy. Lieutenant General Carls? Him? Lieutenant General Carls was a famous awakened. It wasn't common for him to just give up. Queen Mary frowned as she was reminded of that time. Most of all, the members of the Templar Knights confirmed it directly. At the same time, the leader of the Templar Knights opened his mouth. I can read the past of a place. The only time I can't read the past is when there is an extraordinary presence. And I couldn't read the past at Buckingham Palace. The leader of the Templar Knights was a strange man wearing silver armor and holding a thin sword. A face that seemed both young and old. His age couldn't be guessed at all. There was a skill like that? No. How can you be sure the man is a Grand Duke just because the past couldn't be read? Australia's leader. It was a country relatively free from the aggression of the creatures and had developed their strength. However, the leader of the Templar Knights just casually looked in his eyes. I said, place, but that also includes humans. I can read the past of everyone in this place, including the nasty things you did inside the airplane yesterday. Aang and Rhaenyra, I know you enjoyed them. There was silence. They all looked uncomfortable. It was difficult to imagine that something was installed in the plane. They always searched with state-of-the-art detectors as well as unique magic power detectors. The Knights Templar have followed the whereabouts of the demons. The most in-depth ones are the Grand Dukes. We can read other demons, but not the Grand Dukes. This means they are highly dangerous. I agree. The leaders of the Freemasons and Illuminati also agreed. They viewed the Grand Dukes as different. The identities of the Grand Dukes were unknown except for Ariel Diablo. Queen Mary said quietly, and there is one more clue. His name is Randolph. I coincidentally heard that name in Korea. Don Gullinam swallowed his saliva. The weapon he thought about using was already known? At this meeting, Kim Yong-woo, who is the general leader of the South Korean Awakened and Heaven's Will Guild Master, is present. Heaven's Will. I've heard of it. It was a name they heard once in a while. It was due to the fact that they had more achievements than other guilds. But South Korea had been ruined by the invasion of numerous demons and creatures. Kim Yong-woo was behind Queen Mary. He bowed his head but had a displeased expression on his face. You said his name is Randolph Briggseel? Kim Yong-woo scratched his head at Queen Mary's question. That name, don't say it so casually. He is our savior, the hero who saved South Korea. To dare compare him to a demon? Wasn't his performance amazing compared to normal Awakened? I heard from some of your guild members, so it is doubtful that he is a human. Of course, a hero can't be like ordinary humans. Each Awakened has different strengths and he is just on a higher level. I am uncomfortable to be here, but I came in order to resolve Queen Mary's misunderstanding. His words could be considered rude, but Queen Mary didn't lose her smile. Kim Yong-woo's faith was amazing. There was blind faith in his eyes. Other people didn't know it, but eyes held great secrets. Don Gullinam couldn't understand it either. The same name could be a coincidence. It was highly likely. Nevertheless, why was she like this? Queen Mary was confident, and if she was right, what type of person was Randolph Briggseel? He was very curious. It was ironic that a demonic Grand Duke would be called a savior and hero. That much faith was unusual. Heaven's Will. They were once lauded as the best guild. Who could instill such faith in their guild master? If all the puzzles were joined together to form a single picture. Don Gullinam felt goosebumps form on his body. He really is the best scammer. Kim Yong-woo didn't know how this had happened. Randolph Briggseel, his master, hero and maybe savior. No, it was highly likely that the person called savior was Randolph Briggseel. At least, Kim Yong-woo thought so. He was covering his face for some reason. He didn't care about his achievements, which was why he didn't reveal himself. However, now someone was trying to shit on his great achievements. Framing him and starting a witch hunt. Kim Yong-woo couldn't stand still. Even if, only one, if he really was a demon, then it didn't matter to Kim Yong-woo. If it wasn't for him, Korea would have ended. It wouldn't have been possible for Kim Yong-woo to keep his place as leader of Heaven's Will, and he would have probably already been buried in the ground. It was because Kim Yong-woo lacked power compared to his authority. There were hyenas in every direction aiming for his position. However, Heaven's Will was everything to Kim Yong-woo. Kim Yong-woo's life started to change after he became an Awakened and made Heaven's Will. He hadn't even studied properly and had no special skills, yet he somehow became the man with the best guild in Korea. And Randolph Briggseel was the one who helped him with the reversal. Now that name was being ruined. Even if it was the distant past, Kim Yong-woo knew better than anybody what faith was. Having faith was the only way for someone to live in this confusing world. Even if he is the one who really showed up, it was just to warn humanity, not threaten them. Then you admit that he is a demon? The leader of the Templar Knights stared at Kim Yong-woo with cold, machine-like eyes. They were definitely creepy, but he didn't feel threatened. No, what demon would be concerned about humans? The name Randolph Brigzeal, in Korea, it literally means hero. However, you are firm in the belief that he is a Grand Duke. His actions might not be understandable, but you shouldn't judge his actions without seeing the results. No human can escape my skill. Yet, there are many scenes in your past that I can't see. Kim Yong-woo only sneered after hearing that his past was red. He was present from the beginning. It was like the heavens had sent him to me to solve my trials. He was stronger than anyone else yet didn't come forward. It was like he was preparing for something. I even had the feeling that he knew the future. And the preparations he made started to bloom one by one. The future? That's right. He knows the future. Reading the past? That is nothing. He is a messenger sent by the heavens to prepare for the future. He was agitated, but Kim Yong-woo's words were 100% projection. Kim Yong-woo had been thinking about a man called Randolph Brigzeal. That's why he followed Randolph Brigzeal. He had often disappeared, but he always appeared at the necessary moment. He had done a background check once. But there was nothing. He had complete confidence and was reliable. There was no other towering presence like that on Earth. Kim Yong-woo didn't think he was a demon or creature, but that was a thing of the past. Now he didn't care about that at all. He might be a demon favorable towards humans. Kim Yong-woo clicked his tongue at the words of the leader of the Templar Knights. A demon helping humans? No. Do you know anything about demons? Several demons devastated Korea. One day they dragged their creatures and attacked. They locked humans in cages. Our bodies were used like toys and experimented with. Watching those days of humiliation, the Korean warriors know more about demons than anyone else in the world. For demons, humans are just to be mocked. Kim Yong-woo knew this fact very well. As the leader of the most powerful guild, Kim Yong-woo had a lot of experience with demons. He was certain that Randolph Brigzeal wasn't a demon. A demon would absolutely never help humans. And his confidence convinced some of the others. The leader of the Templar Knights couldn't answer. Queen Mary was watching with great interest. Kim Yong-woo had placed a decisive wedge. Anyway, we've received a warning. Heavens will actively participate in this mission. A raid was organized. The leaders of each country and major groups had sent their strongest awakened to the United Kingdom. In addition, the United States used the cobalt that they had secretly manufactured. Cobalt maximized radiation leaks in nuclear bombs, so it was a prohibited material due to the dangers. There were no reports about it being developed due to it being lethal to humanity, but the United States had done it in secret. Of course, the cobalt weapon was only supposed to be used as a last resort. As the fate of humanity started being at risk, the scientists studied the awakened and created something beyond imagination. I don't know if humanity will self-destruct. Kim Yong-woo sighed after finding out some parts of the operation. Although Heavens will dispatch 20 people for the operation, he belatedly felt regret. Guild Master, did you see? Yoon-hai asked mischievously. Did I see what? The awakened that were gathered. I am curious. Kim Yong-woo shrugged. They are not stronger than you. If you are in danger, then Edward will protect you, so why should I care? Yoon-hai laughed. It was like he said. A large space underground. There were more than 1,000 awakened gathered, and they were the powerhouses of each country or guild. But Yoon-hai and Edward weren't inferior to them. No, they were 1 or 2 stages stronger. All the other awakened from Korea also had high levels. It was the reason Kim Yong-woo wasn't worried. Anyway, you are like a sly fox. Shut up. Spend the next 3 days becoming familiar with the team. It is like raising a chicken from an egg. Make it so that they won't throw your body away if you are dying. Why is Guild Master acting like this? I am busy. Kim Yong-woo used a thick book to slap Yoon-hai's cheeks lightly. He was the operations commander, so there were many things to know. It would take 3 weeks to memorize all of this, let alone 3 days. Yoon-hai pouted. Edward, this uncle is no fun. Will you play with Nuna? Edward Windsor. The young man standing behind Yu Un-hai couldn't take his eyes off her. That's good. What should we play? Well, do you know how to break a seal? Kim Yong-woo shouted as he heard those words. Hey, what are you going to do? Do you know what is more important than comradeship, Guildmaster? It is the pecking order, pecking order. If I don't properly establish the pecking order, then the dog might bite the owner in an emergency. Ha, Kim Yong-woo shook his head. It was true that there could be incidents in times of trouble. Not long ago, people used an excuse to try something against the Savior's children. Kim Yong-woo had gone to Yu Un-hai, who directly dealt out punishment. Anyway, if I don't move, then won't other candidates start taking action? Didn't Gear and Nim set this operation as the decisive battle? Depending on the performance, the king will be decided. The timing is good. The decisive battle for the king was supposed to have the 7 candidates fight fiercely against each other. However, the timing made that impossible. Instead, the Giran decided that the one with the highest achievements in this operation would get the position. All 7 candidates agreed. Yu Un-hai's thoughts didn't stop there. She was obsessed with being the king, so that she could become stronger. So he said, quietly and neatly, and make it clear, do you understand what I am saying? I will come back as the best. At that time, Guild Master should be calling me boss. Yes, yes. Yu Un-hai laughed and left. At that time, I was near the dungeon in China. I looked at the lush mountains opposite the dungeon. Tashmal. Where is Hash? Tashmal spoke with a complicated expression. It isn't a good idea to do this right now. The other angels have just started to acknowledge him. Of all the angels currently on Earth, Hash had the highest rank. The angels moved under a tricky hierarchy, so Hash was given the best treatment. He might not be that old, but luckily he managed to infiltrate the sacred zone and deceived the angels. It was a very important time, but I firmly shook my head. This will be the true beginning of everything. There is no way the angels can miss this stage. Tashmal, bring Hash to me straight away. I understand. Tashmal moved. A sacred zone. A place that would cause even my skin to tingle. Demons and creatures wouldn't dare step foot in there. However, Tashmal was a fallen angel and had considerable resistance to the divine power. She moved and disappeared from my sight. I need to use all the cards I have. The Grand Dukes will bring a significant amount of creatures. I wonder who will be the strongest. I folded my arms and laughed coldly. Chapter 206 to 208. Those who gather. Gathering all the Grand Dukes. It was a public meeting at the Greenwich Observatory. At the very least, I needed to decorate the meeting place. I had showed off my status by sending the invitations, so I couldn't skip this task. I called the Dwarf King and all the dwarves. Of course, Oswin was necessary and he arrived first at the Greenwich Observatory. Your Majesty, you are giving me too many things to do. I know. Isn't unraveling the High Dark Elf's curse the most important task that your Majesty gave me? It takes a considerable amount of time to create a weapon that will block a curse like that. I know. I was just finishing off an idea for an experiment. At the very least, my skills are needed to create. Oswin. Hum. I couldn't help saying such words. It is very important. Oswin was somewhat disgruntled. It seemed like unraveling the High Dark Elf's curse wasn't going that well. Chrysley's mother and Aujin's lover. She had been killed by a very powerful being and trapped by a curse. It wasn't easy even for Oswin. I understood, but he needed to cool his overheated head a little bit. He had profound knowledge in the blacksmithing area, but wasn't he also my subordinate? I wouldn't have cared in my previous life, but now I felt some sympathy. If things weren't going well, then he should take a break. Completed in 2 days. 2 days is a little tight. 200 dwarves will be required. Oswin's eyes burned as he decided to change his mindset. Even if things didn't work out, it was clear that he liked making things. I nodded lightly. I will give you 400 dwarves, so take care of it. So, it is possible to decorate things a little more luxuriously. Did you complete the request I asked for a week ago? Ah, that request. It is finished. There are exactly 200. I touched my jaw. I had clearly entrusted many things to Oswin. This was because Oswin was the only one who could do it. I had great respect for Oswin's abilities. When talking about usefulness, Oswin was one of the top 2. He was sly but thoroughly capable. I didn't care as long as he didn't go against me. Anyway, Oswin was busy with the High Dark Elf's curse when I presented him with the task. Fortunately, he managed to complete it amongst everything else he had to do. Install half of them. Should I make them as inconspicuous as possible? You understand. I will tell Fairy Nim what is necessary. Do so. Then, Oswin bowed and left. There were many tasks, but he had no substitute. He could only blame his own excellent abilities. However, Oswin never did a shoddy job. He was always committed to producing the best possible results. I couldn't not use him. This magic power? Just like the wind carrying a scent, I turned my eyes in the direction that the magic power was coming from. As soon as I noticed, the source of the magic power appeared next to me. This is a fairly decent place. A familiar face. The Grand Duke who won in my previous life. I remembered being struck by her and dying. Ariel Diablo. The appointment time is still far away. It is polite to come early. This is the first time I've heard that. Demons. It was natural for them to come later than the set time. It wasn't polite, but they took it for granted. I never thought that the Grand Dukes would show up exactly at the set time. Of course, Ariel Diablo was a very special person. She was different from the other demons. I had no intention of denying it. It has become troublesome. However, Oswin had just left. It was to install the pre-prepared things. It would become complicated if Ariel Diablo noticed. Ariel Diablo spread out her arms and said confidently, "My army will arrive soon. During that time, I want to relax and see this place." There was no apparent hostility. She was friendly and asked many questions. I couldn't rule out the possibility that she had come here first for some secret reason. But I still had a lot of work to do. I didn't have time to show Ariel Diablo around. It is a little tough. I should have written on the invitation not to come in advance. However, there had been no reason for it. I shrugged and said, "It is fine as long as you behave well as a guest." Haha, I'm not as brutish as Upa. The two of them were at war. It was natural for them to gossip about each other. Maxium had interfered in the war between them, however I spoke impatiently. "I will assign someone to guide you. The other guys don't fit. Can't we have a leisurely conversation while walking?" Yeehee. Something small popped out as soon as I called her name. It was Yeehee arriving. Yeehee. Master, did you call Yeehee? Be a guide. Who? Ah, demon. Yeehee screamed and hurriedly summoned her sword, helmet and shield. They were all tokens of a fairy knight. Ariel Diablo gazed at her appearance with interested eyes. A magical fairy. Get away from Master, you bad demon. Yeehee brandished her sword in preparation for battle. An ordinary fairy would find it impossible to attack a demon, but Yeehee had considerable strength. But Ariel just stretched out her hand. Duck. Hying. Yeehee rubbed her forehead while sitting on the ground. She didn't disappear from the blow due to being connected to the dungeon core. There is a way to upgrade a fairy? How interesting. Her eyes were filled with curiosity. Before I knew it, I was in the background. Yeehee. She is Grand Duke Ariel Diablo. Guide her moderately. I emphasized the idea of, not everything. It wasn't strange since she was an enemy. Keep to the outskirts. Avoid the interior as much as possible. I sent those words to Yeehee. The perception of Ariel Diablo's eyes transcended imagination. It wasn't just limited to the physical. It would be a problem if she found what Oswin was installing. I believed in Oswin, but it didn't hurt to be cautious. Yeehee blinked and replied, "Yes, Master." Yeehee. Well, yes. Yeehee will guide this bad demon. Che. She shook her rear and flew up again. Ariel Diablo folded her arms and looked at Yeehee. I am not a bad demon. Mysterious fairy. No, all demons are bad except for Master. Yeehee knows it well. You resemble your master. Ariel Diablo laughed. She continued, "Then guide me well. Come along, Pong." Yeehee flew off at her highest speed. She was fast like the wind. A funny fairy. She is a troublemaker. Ariel touched her chin as she wondered. I wonder how you managed such a thing. I frowned. She had an attitude when talking about me. I didn't like it. Ariel Diablo saw my expression and shook her head. I have no intentions of causing trouble. I need to catch that cute fairy. Then I'll see you later. She clasped her hands behind her back. She slowly moved her feet. Pong. As soon as she took the next step, she disappeared. Yeehee is slower. She would be caught sooner or later, so I moved. The time remaining was short and I had a lot to do. What is Randolph Brigseel like as a demon? Ariel Diablo asked after Yi surrendered. There was a moment of silence after Ariel Diablo's question. Yi snorted and spread open her 10 fingers before counting them one by one. Nice, caring, cool, strong, smart, helps me out, a very attractive smelling magic power. I understand. Stop. I roughly get the idea. She really would list his qualities without ending, so Ariel Diablo waved her hand. Why do you ask? Hoo-hoo, it has been a long time since I've been treated like this. By the way, if you can become the fairy queen, then why are you here? Fairy? Queen? Yi? No? Yi's eyes widened with shock as she answered. But Ariel just continued like she was talking to herself. Doesn't the contract only last until the fairy becomes the fairy ruler? If you become the fairy queen, then you don't have to maintain this current unequal contract. The emergence of a fairy ruler is something that all fairies desire. They long for it. It is something that can't be easily replaced. Bah! Are you telling Yi what to do? Do you think becoming the fairy ruler is that easy? I know quite a bit about fairies. Fairy Yi. At the same time, Ariel Diablo's eyes turned a pale blue. It was a change from the usual red. The atmosphere was also very different. Yi's mouth dropped open. You, shish. This is a secret that nobody knows except for my deceased father. How does a demon have fairy eyes? It is impossible. I will tell you everything. Ariel Diablo looked around. It was a small comfort that there was nobody around them. After a while, her red eyes returned while Yi was staring at her. Yi was nervous. It was like she was going to be eaten at any moment. Ariel Diablo continued in a small but sharp tone. Fairy Yi, I have told you one of my secrets. So won't you tell me? Why you won't become the fairy ruler even though you are capable of it? Ariel Diablo's army was surprisingly small. Silver Knights. It seemed like the White Knights I heard a report about had been completed. They appeared exactly one day after Ariel Diablo. I looked at them from the top of Greenwich Observatory. There were exactly 250 of them. Royal Guards? They felt different from ordinary creatures. It is like how it was reported. They weren't significantly different from what Chrisley and Oswin reported to me. They had brought my invitations to the Grand Dukes, and in return, they reported back to me what they saw. Their words weren't exaggerated. Is that all? I tilted my head to one side. If so, she had great confidence. Ariel Diablo's nature wasn't to do a lot of back maneuvering. There was a reason why her preparations might seem lacking. Confidence? That's right. Ariel Diablo was completely confident in her creatures. That's why I decided to judge it for myself. So, I needed to look more carefully. 250 Silver Knights came through the gates. Their sizes were different and all of them were female. Their ages were also different. I took a deep breath. Their magic power smelt a little different. There was an ominous feeling that I couldn't explain. They were neither Death Knights nor Dark Warriors. The synthesis of a new species. I nodded a little bit. They weren't an entirely new species. There was some sense of familiarity from the Silver Knights. The Knights were all made of advanced creatures. There were no signs that they were even human. I didn't know what Ariel intended by combining the creatures together, or that it had even been possible. I wonder what creatures were used. Interesting. There were thousands of different creatures. I only had a simple abbreviated list of creatures, so it wasn't surprising that I didn't know every one. However, that wasn't what I was talking about right now. The Knights were made by synthesizing creatures. Although they were a new species, they were usually called chimera. The problem was combining the creatures and ensuring that they maintain a constant shape. Impossible. As far as I knew, it didn't make sense. I didn't have deep knowledge about chimeras, but I was certain about this. A chimera made from combining more than 3 creatures wouldn't be able to act. It was because the body would become unstable and they would self-destruct. I met the eyes of the Silver Knight in the lead. Those eyes. I nodded lightly. I noticed one truth the moment I met the Knight's eyes. A large mixture. I was convinced. The 250 Knights that represented Ariel Diablo were a mixture of hundreds of creatures. Indeed, I couldn't ignore her source of confidence. The date on the invitation. I honestly hadn't expected any of the Grand Dukes except for Ariel Diablo to be on time. They were arrogant, proud and irreverent. But it didn't take long to find out that I was wrong. The day after Ariel Diablo's Silver Knights arrived. From the east, west and north, the armies of the Grand Dukes simultaneously appeared. It was right after the appointed time, so I couldn't help but sneer at the coincidence. A wave of creatures, hundreds of thousands, maybe over 1 million creatures filled the fields. A spectacular sight. It was hard to feel any joy at the situation. The sight was enough to cause despair. The large armies arrived in front of the doors. The Grand Dukes and the demons in their factions dismounted from their mounts and walked forward with dignity. There was no tension in their faces. They were just filled with absolute confidence. Each Grand Duke had no doubt that their faction was the strongest. However, it was impossible to turn back. There would only be one final winner. I couldn't look weak. The weak demons were cold since birth. "Open the door," I ordered. Soon the door opened and they stepped foot inside the castle. What should I say? It was a strange atmosphere. I had invited them to the Greenwich Observatory. That was an excellent castle. However, the castle just looked small from the viewpoint of the Grand Dukes. The numerous expensive decorations couldn't satisfy their eyes. It was because there wasn't enough time to get everything ready. It was literally nothing more than a show. They had been caught. There were a number of reasons, with the main contributor being the invitation I sent. However, I didn't see any signs of discomfort on their faces. The contents were provocative. I wrote down a secret that nobody else knew. Their gazes were filled with questions about how I knew. Yet, strangely, there was no tension. I led them to the banquet prepared for them as the creatures quietly played music. "Have some." I copied a human's banquet and politely handed them cups. This calm atmosphere, it was mimicking a human party. In the case of the demons, they were uncomfortable because it was unfamiliar to them. However, they were Grand Dukes. They had experienced many things and were well prepared. The factions gathered together and drank from the cups. "The taste is okay." Upa smirked. He was someone with quite a lot of greed. I replied lightly, "This is the best drink. It is a cognac. I don't know the name, but isn't it okay for a human brew?" My words were insulting to the drink. I predicted that the alcohol lover Upa would say something. However, his reaction was quite different. "It is much better than the silly contents of the invitations. It is funny since you don't have the ability to write well." I parried his insult. Neither of us was apologizing. Even if it was a prank. The magician of the moon isn't here. I searched around Upa but couldn't feel the mysterious magic of Gustarte. No matter how powerful the weapon, it wouldn't be here if it was unstable. That was what I thought. However, the power of the demons under him was quite good. In the meantime, they had made steep progress and the magic power was slightly better than other factions. Succubus Queen. The most prominent one was Groggy Inpir, a demon who loved succubi. He filled his entire dungeon with succubuses. He was accompanied by a succubus queen, a creature I hadn't seen in my previous life. A high-class 3LV creature that had never appeared at the Demon World auction. It was clear that events were different. On the other hand, what about Pandemonium? He didn't seem much different from before. It felt like his power was similar to when the Giran and Korean Awakened first attacked his empty dungeons. He had absorbed Okuyo's faction, but that was all. He had also lost a considerable amount of power attacking my dungeon. Out of all the Grand Dukes, Pandemonium seemed to be the most lacking. I didn't know what Pandemonium was doing. This banquet, it is like the humans. Pandemonium, you must have experienced a human banquet. You have lived for many years. I've never seen it before. By the way, you didn't send the invitations for something like this, Randolph Briggseel. Wasn't it to discuss countermeasures? Ah, I nodded. I remembered that I had put that down in the contents. But to be honest, I didn't know Pandemonium would react this way. The angels on Earth weren't very threatening. However, it seemed like they were aware that Camiel would soon descend. I opened my mouth. Countermeasures against the angels? Of course, I didn't mean that. Angels are things that I can easily step on. Then what? I looked at Pandemonium with confusion. But Pandemonium's face was distorted with displeasure. It wasn't just him. The other demons and Grand Dukes were the same. They thought I was pretending not to know. There is something. The problem was that I couldn't tell what it was. But it was easy to figure it out. They were seeking something from me, so I just laughed. A special event, do you know? Special event. It was an event that appeared suddenly and they didn't know when or where it would happen. But I didn't know about any special events right now. In addition, the others didn't have a big reaction to the words special event. That wasn't it. Do all the other demons have a special event? But I didn't receive it. It was strange. If everyone else experienced a special event, then there was no reason for me to be excluded. But I was excluded, and they responded quickly to my invitation. At least, that was what I saw. Pandemonium came close to me and said, "Open the way to the demon world, Randolph Briggseel. You know how to do it. If not, you wouldn't have thought of gathering all of us like this. There is no time for a banquet." All eyes turned towards me. This isn't good. My goal was to make the Grand Dukes hostile and uncontrollable towards each other. But everyone was aiming towards me. I would never be able to win. At that moment, my skin started to prickle as I felt holy power. The angels have left the sacred zone, Ariel Diablo declared as she stared towards the east. Not good. The news made matters worse. I only wanted one thing. The demons would start to crack at the meeting while the angels and humans pounced. All the demons and creatures were gathered here so they would receive considerable damage. And I would start the negotiations from the most favorable place. It is broken. They were only focused on me for some reason. The words, "special event," rang in my ears. I didn't know why I didn't see it, and they did. Shouldn't a special event happen to everyone? So I started to try and clean this up. Right now I had a headache, but there was still a chance to turn this to my favor. Rather, I had the ability to reverse the situation to put myself on top. I thought for a moment. For example, the emergence of the cruel Commander Maxium. The message was delivered to all demons and human awakened. Not only that, I also had experience from my previous life. It was abnormal no matter how I thought about it. Something had taken a terrible turn. I wanted to find out, but I had to pretend to know the situation. If I didn't know, then they were likely to have suspicions. The Grand Dukes would jump on me. I had to avoid that situation. The demon world. They believe I can open the path to it. No, they are hoping I will open it. I inwardly nodded. A large amount of angels were coming from the east, but there was still time. A method to travel to the demon world. I know a possible way. Yihi's golden crown. It was a treasure she received that sent me to the underground world. It was a simulated world created by the Hell Monarch. As a result, it wasn't impossible to return to the demon world. It was only a prediction, but the likelihood was high. I wonder why I didn't get a message about the special event. If Yihi is the key, then that would also apply to me. The message not being delivered. Maybe it is for those who belong to the system but have nothing to do with the special event, or those who don't belong to the system. I scowled. The system made by the devil was highly sophisticated. Of course, I belonged to the system. I had come to Earth through the agreement with the devil. I shouldn't be cut off from the special events. So the only thing left were those who didn't belong. There were some creatures who appeared as special events in my previous life where clear messages weren't received. This was for sure. The Hell Monarch. I couldn't think of any more possibilities. Of course, he was recognized as the dungeon master. But he couldn't operate the dungeon itself. At the same time, I was recognized as the Hell Monarch. Otherwise, Yihi's crown should have returned me to the demon world. There were still many doubts. I had the heart of the Hell Monarch, so the world might recognize me as the Hell Monarch. Of course, the demons were unaware of these facts. At the same time, I remembered the curse on the High Dark Elf. Chrysley's mother lost her life in an attack from someone with a similar magic power. It was hard to believe that there would be a third person who inherited something from the Hell Monarch. Was this somehow connected with returning to the demon world? As far as I knew, the Hell Monarch was one of the strongest. There were few who could fight against him in a one-to-one fight. He died due to the manipulation of the gods, but who could stop him if he was resurrected? Something must have happened in the demon world for them to be so eager to return. It was obvious. I formed a loose fist. I straightened my back and looked towards the east. Kurung. Kwa Kwang. The outside of the castle was already a battlefield. The creatures waiting outside and the angels coming from the east engaged in battle without hesitation. Many demons also left the castle to control them. This situation seemed unacceptable, and I wanted to finish it as soon as possible. I gave a small smile when I saw it. At first it seemed complicated, but I just needed to look at the important parts. I am still holding the key. My mind became lighter. The term, cherub, referred to a superior angel who was said to have sublime wisdom. The second highest amongst the 9th level angels, they were very powerful. It wasn't impossible to call them a one-man army since they possessed the power to take care of a Grand Duke. Right now, a cherub was the highest rank among the angels on Earth. Although he hadn't been born for a long time, he exerted absolute influence on the angels. Tens of thousands of angels appeared from all over the world. They proclaimed a dungeon in China as another sacred zone. From there, they were able to become stronger and regain their lost strength. Of course, the sacred zone was a fortress and the demons didn't dare attack. Now the angels had forsaken that fortress and attacked the demons. Their numbers might be inferior, but most of the angels had recovered their strength and wouldn't be easy. Even so, the results were fixed. Without the humans, the angels weren't the only ones moving under my hand. Moving the angels on Earth had been a success, so now it was time to wait for the other side. The joining of the humans. The exact date was set so they would be fools if they didn't move. It was quite a cheap method. Unless an upset happens, I can watch with both hands behind my back. I stood on top of the clock tower. It was time to watch everything occurring. The awakened secretly hiding started to move. The moment that the Grand Dukes started to move, the humans thought of it as an opportunity to decide the world's fate. They used their information network to read the movements of the Grand Dukes and creatures, and became convinced they were heading to Greenwich Observatory. At the very least, it was obvious that something unusual was happening at Greenwich Observatory. It was an opportunity to take care of the demons. There is a flower here. A flower? Who? Should we have flower code names? Guildmaster? Dozens of kilometers from Greenwich Observatory, Yu Hai and her team were moving between the ruins of a shattered city. An answer came from the radio after Yu Hai spoke. Then I'll give you a flower best suited for you. It was Kim Yong-woo's voice. He was directing the operation through the radio. Yu Hai sighed. Will it be bad? People call you the flower of the battlefield. Didn't you clean up everybody? Then shall I call you the boss flower? The strongest people from every country had been gathered in the underground bunker. After defeating all of them, Yu Hai proved she was the strongest. As promised, Kim Yong-woo started calling her boss. Of course, Yu Hai didn't dislike her position. Flowers were too vulnerable. Shut up, I will receive the next instructions. We have arrived at the designated position. Already? Then wait, there is another team that needs to reach that position. Yu Hai asked with confusion. Huh? Don't we have the most important thing to do? Shouldn't we move in secret? It is important, but it is an emergency right now. It was decided that another team is necessary to penetrate through. What's going on? Angels are appearing. There are thousands of them. Talk. Yu Hai slapped her forehead. Why all of a sudden? No, shouldn't we have known that in advance? Electronic devices don't work inside the sacred zone. Furthermore, they suddenly appeared via a warp. How could we humans read that? Yu Hai gritted her teeth after hearing Kim Yong-woo's complaints. I plan to go quietly. How can we move in the midst of a war zone? Yu Hai turned around. Edward Windsor was walking while carrying a steel bag. That is humanity's hope. You need to move somehow. Just break through. You know that it is almost impossible to penetrate from the sky or the sea, right? The awakened have to move quietly and directly. Inside the bag was the most powerful weapon in the history of mankind. Yu Hai had the role of bringing it to the center of Greenwich Observatory. If it was in the center, then they calculated they could kill a huge number of demons and creatures at once. This is a weapon created by the essence of science, numerous magic items and a large number of cores. Yu Hai bit her lip. If she did it properly, then it would be humanity's victory. Hundreds of supercomputers made a quadrillion calculations, so it couldn't be wrong. The problem was how to move it. Even a powerful jet fighter flying at Mach speed wouldn't show any strength in front of a powerful creature. It was likely to be shot down. It was the same for the sea. There was no other way but for strong awakened to hide and move with it. So Yu Hai and her team were picked. How long do I have to wait? Soon. It was an ambiguous answer. However, Yu Hai and Edward were able to notice immediately. A holy power that could even be felt from afar. At first they thought of angels, but they were clearly humans. That wasn't the only strange part. It was too small to be called a team. There were only 2 women. Oh, no. Fireballs were floating next to them with the appearance of teenage girls if they looked closely. So there were 4 of them? Hello. One was energetic while the other remained silent. The fireballs just floated around quietly. Are you the team that Guild Master Kim Yong-woo said? One of the women laughed at Yoo Eun-hai's question. Yes, that's right. I'm Kim Yura and my quiet sister over there is Kim Min-ji. We both have the High Priest job, so we will be useful. And our partners are Ray and Sarah. The girls made of fire greeted them briefly. Yoo Eun-hai knew that the girls were fire spirits. These days, quite a large number of awakened had made contracts with fire spirits. Ah, I'm Yoo Eun-hai. I have the job of a soldier. Please take care of me. I will. Kim Yura answered with a sweet smile. Chapter 209 to 213, Gustarte. There was a long way to go and their foes were numerous. Even if they only had a small elite party, it was impossible to completely avoid so many eyes. The millions of creatures and angels were all enemies. Setting aside the creatures, the way that the angels fought was disgusting for humans. In a combat situation, the angels were no different from the creatures. The way the angels fought, it was an insensitivity that didn't care about anything but themselves. If a passing human blocked the road, then the angels would burn them. At least angels didn't go hunting humans. But right now, this was a war zone. A chaotic place filled with blood where reason was paralyzed. Anybody found was hunted without delay. Yoo Eun-hai's party were the top-level awakened and even they had trouble holding on. Among them, the high priests Kim Yura and Kim Min-ji played great roles. Suture, regeneration. The combination of the two was beyond astonishing. They watched in amazement as amputated limbs were miraculously restored at once. Among the priests' jobs, it was a miracle, not possible for them. Yet it had become a reality. Suture could immediately stitch up wounds while regeneration completely healed a wound. There were no side effects. Commonly referred to as equivalent exchange, each awakened experienced it to a certain extent when using skills. The higher rank the skill, the more severe the fatigue due to loss of magic power. But they didn't get tired. Are they really people? Yoo Eun-hai inwardly shook her head. Right now they were halfway there. They had encountered angels and creatures dozens of times, causing casualties to appear. However, their common point was that they died instantly. Kim Yura and Kim Min-ji couldn't save the dead. If they could bring back the dead, then it would make the weight of living seem too low. She had seen many deaths. If they were revived, she felt like her mind would be troubled. Either way, the party was able to reach this point due to the severe injuries being treated immediately. Half the party members had been sacrificed to reach halfway to their target. If a simple calculation was done, they would all die by the time they arrived at the target. They have to arrive, even if it means dying. To do this, I must protect them. Yoo Eun-hai's eyes were shining. She had seen many awakened with healing skills, but it was the first time she had seen it to this degree. Their talent was necessary to reach the goal. She only needed one person to fulfill the purpose. There was no guarantee that person would be Yoo Eun-hai. Rather than that, Yoo Eun-hai looked at Edward Windsor. Nuna, are you nervous? Edward Windsor grinned. He was different compared to when she first saw him as a child. Sometimes he looked at her like a mother, sometimes like a lover, but Yoo Eun-hai couldn't repay those expectations. He wasn't to blame. Edward Windsor was too young. That's all. He grew stronger at a speed beyond imagination. Yoo Eun-hai was praised as the best, but Edward Windsor had the qualities to become the strongest. He had already almost caught up with her, so it was an unbelievable speed. If only one person could survive, then it had to be Edward Windsor. Yoo Eun-hai thought it was the right choice for the world and for him. What is there to be nervous about? Let's move quickly. We'll need to skirt around that road. Go around that road? I think there is some fighting in that area. Even if it takes a little more time, it is better to go to the side. I agree. Puik. Edward shrugged as he slashed an ogre's neck. It was dead, but he cut it again just for confirmation. The captain was Yoo Eun-hai. Every team member followed her commands without questioning it. Edward was still too young and inexperienced to lead. However, he would be able to take her place in 1 or 2 years. He could rise to Kim Yong-woo's position in an instant. She felt like the burden on her was a little bit lighter. This mission, not all of us can survive. Yoo Eun-hai tried to be stronger as she faced all types of absurd situations. The strong had to protect the weak and fight against injustice. If no one did that, then corruption would be the only thing remaining. This world would perish. It was obvious when people showed radical and violent behavior towards the Savior's children. She went on this mission to make sure it would succeed. Her final goal was to become the king, but Edward was also a candidate. The more they fought and got closer to their destination, the survival rate was unlikely to be high. Her intuition was usually never wrong. If I die, you will lead the party, Edward. Don't talk like a loser. Edward scowled. Even though he had spent a long time in the training room, Edward still had childlike aspects. Promise. However, Yu Un-hai was serious. If a crisis situation happened and Yu Un-hai died, then Edward needed to take over. It wasn't just for the future. Was it something like a deep affection? She spoiled him despite never having a younger sibling or child, so it felt strange. Edward turned his head with a serious expression. I promise, but it isn't going to happen. Good. Let's move on. Captain Nim, it is hard to move right now. Kim Yura approached Yu Un-hai after treating her last patient. It is hard to move? Creatures and angels are approaching this direction quickly. I'm sure since my spirit ray has detected it. The fire spirits, although numerous awakened had contracts with them, they were much smaller than the sisters' fire spirits. Apart from their size, the fire spirits were powerful. To be honest, they were better than some awakened. The distance? Yu Un-hai believed Kim Yura's words. She couldn't believe it earlier, but similar situations had happened several times. Now she had no questions. Forward, wait, Ray, what? Kim Yura's expression became determined. The fire spirit Ray seemed to be telling Kim Yura something important. Kim Yura spoke hurriedly after hearing the contents. Run away, right now. We can't handle it? There is no time. There is no way we can handle it. She didn't even want to waste time saying the name. Yu Un-hai had to choose. It was happening very quickly. Should she believe Kim Yura's words and retreat, or keep going forward? There was no time. If they retreated, then it would be more difficult to accomplish their goal. But she made a quick decision. Retreat. It's too late. Avoid it, as far as possible. Just as Yu Un-hai was about to open her mouth. Kururung. The ground shook. Sayu. The sky turned black. Swa. A black sphere similar to a black sun was floating in the center of the sky. Swang. It started to suck in everything around it. The black sun swallowed up everything quickly and indiscriminately. It was like a black hole. Let me show you the power of a true king, Harpy Swarm. The owner of an amazingly deep voice walked forward. The black sun moved slowly according to his movements. Even darkness was assimilated. Kayak. And, the angels couldn't resist. The Harpy Swarm was referring to the angels. All they could do was scream as their wings were torn. There were angels away from the radius of the black hole, but they didn't survive. The power of a king wasn't that simple or limited. A king that was equal to an army. He called it the power of a king. Countless creatures followed behind the king. In particular, there was an impressive unknown creature with black wings. Cerberuses with black wings. It was like something that would show up in a myth. But such beings wouldn't follow a simple king. He had a droopy face and two eyes that seemed to be drowning in madness. One of the Grand Dukes qualified to call himself a king. He was the demon most hostile to humans and had slaughtered the most. Intelligent humans were wary of him. The most destructive and outspoken demon, he was no different than a living nuclear bomb. He was a Grand Duke that would try to destroy the earth to earn the highest achievements. Now he was slaughtering the angels. Huang. Hundreds of black spheres rose around his body, creating an overwhelming black typhoon. The space twisted and the boundary between the earth and sky disappeared. It wasn't a usual typhoon. Surprisingly, this phenomenon was nothing more than a weapon created by Grand Duke Upa. His right hand grabbed the bottom of the typhoon and the typhoon followed the movements of his hand. The typhoon was handled like a sword and instantly evaporated the angels. A monster beyond the level of a human. Yu Un-hai said miserably. They weren't attacked because they weren't targets. They were a considerable distance from him, so if they were lucky enough to find a hiding spot, then they might not get caught. However, the odds were very slim. Still, it was more risky to move away from this place. A dilemma. Once all the visible angels disappeared, it was likely that a big attack would head their way. That is a Grand Duke. Kim Yura. She was a high priest along with her sister. They were always calm, but right now her voice was strange. It was filled with something other than fear. However, Yu Un-hai didn't realize the subtle difference. Is it different? A Grand Duke is much stronger than those at the same level. For sure, yes. There were 23 people surviving in the party. All of them were silent with fear after Kim Yura's words. It was because they were stunned by the battle scene itself. Huang. The huge typhoon rose and fell like a piece of paper. Nothing remained in the area that the typhoon swept past. It wasn't enough to say that they were processed. It was at a level to move a mountain. And the black sun floating in the sky like a black hole was steadily pulling in the angels around it. One person was overwhelming the angels, so it was impossible to measure his strength. Kahuhuhu. At that moment, Grand Duke Upa laughed loudly. There was one angel not threatened by the typhoon or sucked into the black hole. An angel with 3 pairs of wings. An intermediate rank angel. Rays of light were pouring out from her. The light seemed to protect her from all attacks. Upa said with a smile. Can that light protect you forever? God's blessing is a solid thing that can't be penetrated. That is great. Soon Upa touched the typhoon with his right hand. The typhoon divided into hundreds or thousands of blades that wrapped around the angel. Upa rode on one of the blades and approached the angel. And he carefully pushed his hand into the light. Cheek. It was a light that resisted evil. As soon as Upa's hand touched it, the light fiercely rebelled and tried to burn him. However, there was a triumphant smile on Upa's face and the area his hand was touching was turning dark. Cough. Upa's hands grabbed the angel's neck. I will eat you myself. Once all the light had disappeared, his right hand stroked the angel's body as his mouth bit her neck. Yu Un-hai closed her eyes at the sight. She didn't want to see an angel being eaten by a demon. The scene itself was a triumph for evil. Even if angels didn't help humans, they were still divine beings. She felt somewhat weird. I'd rather. Yu Un-hai was struggling. They had brought a bomb. The name was Hope. If they used it from this distance, would they be able to kill Grand Duke Upa? It would be one great achievement. Hundreds of thousands of creatures would also be wiped out, so it wasn't a bad exchange. A last resort. If we get caught, then I will press the switch for the explosion. She opened her eyes and breathed out. She would act depending on what happened between Upa and the angels. Fortunately, Upa turned around and all the creatures followed him. I'm going crazy. Yu Un-hai finally spoke a while after Upa left. Who? Crazy? What type of unspeakable monster is that? Can we win, Captain? The remaining party members calmed down their wildly beating hearts. We still have hope. As long as we have hope, we can win. Yu Un-hai repeated like she was hypnotizing them. While all the party members agreed with her, Kim Yura and Kim Min-ji had a completely different reaction. In particular, Kim Yura's eyes were complicated. Grand Duke, I watched everything from the clock tower in the center of the castle. My senses touched the sky and the earth, making it possible to read everything that was happening in the vicinity. Upa doesn't hesitate to use his force. Ariel Diablo was at war with Upa Bulanan. How much power did he have that he didn't hesitate to use it? I had to admire him. He has found most of the power from my previous life. It felt like Upa had transferred everything over from my previous life. There seemed to be no difference from then and now. How did he achieve this? I remember that once he transcends, he can summon the giant castle Bulanan. I had transcended, but it wasn't true transcendence. The same was true for Upa. It meant he wasn't qualified to summon the castle Bulanan. Bulanan, I shuddered just thinking about it. It was carved out of the largest mountain in the demon world, and once Upa summoned it, no one could stop it. The only thing I don't see is Pandemonium's power. Ariel was leading her knights and slaughtering the angels. The white knights seemed to become stronger when they were together. Moreover, not all of them were fully grown yet, so they weren't perfect. On the other hand, Pandemonium wasn't active in removing the angels. He didn't even leave the castle. Pandemonium, he must be thinking that I would try to escape. I started laughing. I had created this situation. Naturally, I couldn't be excluded. A lot of creatures were left to watch over me. Pant, master, master. I suddenly heard a familiar voice. When I turned my head, Yi was flying towards me. What's going on? I immediately used magic power to block the area around me. I needed to be careful about surveillance. It would be a hassle if the work I was planning was passed on to the enemy. Yi wiped her forehead with one hand and opened her mouth. Master, Yi just received a communication. It was from Chrisley. Yi wondered what it was. Don't be afraid to tell me. The Magician of the Moon has been captured. I see. I nodded. The Magician of the Moon. It was as I thought. I suspected that Upa wouldn't bring the Magician of the Moon to this place due to his instability, so I had been planning to catch the Magician of the Moon. Fortunately, my plan seemed to be working. The Magician of the Moon had been found. I'm not sure what they want, but the Grand Duke's special event. I still wasn't exactly sure what it was. They wanted me for a specific purpose. I was uncertain due to this part. But at least I knew what I could get my hands on. I looked beyond the horizon. There was no room for rest. The area was filled with dark smoke and blood. The angels were being pushed back. Upa and Ariel's offensives were very sharp. If the angels were destroyed, then Hash would be threatened. I was worried, but I didn't mind at all. The angels aren't idiots. They wouldn't always be pushed. I had learned about the angels from Hash. The number of deaths was regrettable, but they caused considerable damage to the demons. I searched for something. Soon I touched a sharp arrow. It was the item that 0001 had given me. The legend ranked Moon Arrow. It was an essential item to take care of the Magician of the Moon, Gustarte. I didn't know what this arrow would do. My next move would depend on whether he was successfully bound or not. I need to move from this spot for a while. Huh? Do you plan to look around? Yi thinks. I looked around me. In addition to Upa, the other Grand Dukes had a lot of creatures left. It would be difficult if they noticed my movements. But I couldn't not move. Call Oswin. He will take care of the rest. Yes, Master. I just need to call him? Yi flapped her wings. I believe that you will do it well. Pahat. I took out a teleport scroll and tore it. I blocked the flow of magic power in this area, but this scroll was a special grade. There was a disadvantage of not being able to move far, but I could move quietly without disturbing the flow of magic power. After a while, I quietly disappeared. The only one remaining was the confused Yi. Master? Yi blinked. She knew he used a teleport scroll. The problem was that it happened suddenly. Hying, where did he go without telling me? Yi pouted. He had disappeared, leaving only the words, "I believe in you," behind. He had shrugged when saying it, but he had faith in Yi. Oh, this isn't the time. Don't I need to call Oswin? Yi clapped and quickly moved her wings. Anyway, Oswin would know the whole story when she met him. Oswin was sitting in the basement of the castle and taking a break. Oswin, this dead body. I was killed by someone and became a skeleton. I've heard worst insults, Fairy Nim. Master sent Yi to you. Why? Yi doesn't know. Master suddenly went somewhere. Yi shook her head. Oswin was frustrated by her answer. You don't know? Oswin worried about it for a moment. I can roughly guess, but I wonder if Fairy Nim can do it well. What? Yi can do it well. Really? Then I'm glad. Fairy Nim must imitate Master. Huh, you have to transform. Can you fool the enemies? If they discover that Master isn't here, then they might wonder what he is doing. Yi's eyes widened. Oswin laughed at her reaction. Are you not confident? Ah, no, Yi is confident. But how can Yi imitate Master when Yi is so small? I have a way. You have a way? Who am I? I am Oswin, Master's left arm. Of course, Fairy Nim is his right arm. I will make Fairy Nim so perfectly like Master that no one will notice. After a moment, Oswin pulled out a book. This book contains a lot of details about Master. The book will change you into the person written in it. Then shall we begin? Oswin opened the book. After reciting a few words, a gray light surrounded him. After 3 minutes, Yi looked exactly like Randolph Brigzeal. Even the flow of magic power was similar. It should have been able to deceive the creatures. It was unknown if Yi could pull off the role, but Oswin would later reconsider having Yi play the role, but the water had already been spilled. The Magician of the Moon, Gustarte, was strong. It was natural. He was a god, a unique being that was called divine and immortal. It was natural that a mortal had no chance of beating him. But Gustarte was under the control of a mortal. He was extremely unstable from losing his sense of ego. In other words, it meant he was only half a god. A god was a unique type of being. The spirit had to be intact. It was easier to say that he was located between a mortal and an immortal. So it didn't necessarily mean a mortal was doomed to perish against him. The problem was the method. After the location was determined, Chrisley moved with powerful creatures. She gathered all the high-class creatures and those with good maneuverability. Then she started to move once all the Grand Dukes gathered at Greenwich Observatory. Gustarte was with another demon, Earl Rakakan. He was one of Upa's dependable subordinates and his creatures were quite high level. "We will block all external magic power," Chrisley said. She pulled out a small bottle. The bottle was opened and she scattered powder on the ground. The powder traveled in every direction and soon a thin wall was formed. The length reached dozens of kilometers. "Using my magic power, the duration is 3 hours. We must lure in Gustarte. Do it, win." The first one to answer was a titan. The 100 creatures around it stomped their feet like they understood. The Hydra was also behind it. Chrisley raised her wand. The reason for this operation was simple. To prevent communication with the outside. It was highly likely that Rakakan would send a message to Upa once they started to move. Chrisley had to move with that possibility in mind. They had to move carefully and succeed in this mission. The price of this powder was enormous. Even Dungeon Masters suffered when buying it. If they failed, the risk was too big. Greenwich Observatory was very dangerous right now. Dungeon Master had a considerable shortage of creatures around him. It was due to the fact that all the high-class creatures were here. She wanted to be there, but Dungeon Master said that her help was necessary for this operation to be a success. If so, she had to succeed. The first goal is to kill the demon Rakakan. Keep that in mind. Fire burned in Chrisley's eyes. She subsequently said, "Then let's get started." Kuu. The 9 Hydra heads roared at once. Kung, Kung. The other creatures advanced. Earl Rakakan. All the strong creatures were gathered here. The Magician of the Moon was a variable, but if they got rid of Rakakan quickly, there would be no one to control him. Then they could take care of the rest of the creatures. "Everything is for the sake of my Dungeon Master." Chrisley's death wand fluctuated due to her will. Earl Rakakan. He was the 5th-rank demon in Upa's faction. It meant he was right after the Dukes. But he couldn't attend the important meeting. He needed to control the mysterious Magician of the Moon, Gustarte. It was unknown what would happen if Gustarte was left alone, so he needed a watcher. Rakakan was aware that this was important, but he still wanted to attend the meeting. "I can't help feeling regret. It sounds like a pretty interesting situation." Rakakan sat in a small castle and sipped wine. It was boring. It was obvious that most of the demons were gathered in one place, so he was unlikely to receive an attack. "Should I go and see the situation a little bit? I can use this guy to take care of some demons." These were his true intentions. Anyway, there was no possibility of an enemy striking. Only the device was needed to control Gustarte. He didn't understand why a senior demon needed to be used for something like this. "I know Upa Nim's real intentions, but it is really boring." He drank all of the remaining wine. 2 creatures were fighting in front of him. Queek, Gur, an orc lord and bugbear. The bugbear was an advanced 3LV creature that was 1 level higher than the orc lord. However, the use of space was more important inside the castle. By taking advantage of the geographical features, the orc lord was slightly ahead. Numerous creatures were gathered around to watch the fight. This was entertainment. He didn't have anything to do, so this would pass the time. The winner will be granted 1 wish. Whether it is females, weapons, or a wider place to live in the dungeon. Rakakan declared with a smile. The creatures would fight harder if they were being paid. Among the prizes, females or a higher floor in the dungeon were most desired. The closer they were to the top floor, the more magic power that was available. They could be more secure and breed powerful creatures. In addition, it meant getting Rakikan's favor. If Rakakan sat on the left or right side of the devil, then the creatures in his dungeon would also receive benefits. The tribes were able to receive wider land and were guaranteed stability. Their species could keep on multiplying. In many ways, the creatures also had dreams. Quack, Guio. After a life and death struggle, the orc lord won over the bugbear. The orc lord immediately tore off the bugbear's head. Quirk, duck. The bugbear's head rolled on the ground and soon the huge body collapsed. "What is your name?" Unlike the bugbears who don't think, you would have a name. "I am Iron-Eating Lion." The orc lords had pretty high intelligence. They were able to speak easily. Iron-eating lion, you have won a few times and now it is time to fulfill your desire. What do you wish for? Red wolf, fend off, please. The red wolf tribe? We, the iron lion, confront our tribe. Rakakan touched his jaw. Cases like this didn't often happen. Frankly, the orcs were often lacking from Rakikan's viewpoint. They wanted to replace each other but also used some ambiguous methods. Using survival through fighting like this was also considered an honorable method. It might be that the other tribe had a similar strength and defeating them wasn't easy. It might not be bad. It was already asked. A demon could forget that he made a promise, but this was something he did due to boredom. He didn't want to kill the tribes. Okay, the location of the Red Wolf Orc tribe will be on the 6th floor in the future. Meanwhile, the Iron Lion tribe will be placed on the 14th floor. Thank you. Rakikan's dungeon consisted of 20 floors. Among them, the 14th floor wasn't a place they could live in unless the creatures were pretty high level. It was a great reward, so the Orc Lord was thrilled. Once I return to the demon world, I will create a separate dungeon. Rakakan laughed. Running a dungeon was quite fun. He wanted to repeat that fun in the demon world. Kuuong. The dungeon convulsed. What is going on? He quickly realized that someone was attacking. But it was strange. None of the emergency devices were working. All the creatures gathered here were silent. Sniff sniff. What happened? Rakakan called his fairy. A fairy called Sniff Sniff appeared with a hand on his nose. Sniff. The enemy is here. Sniff. They came. The enemy? Show me the situation. Sniff Sniff. Wait a minute. The fairy Sniff Sniff took out a heave crystal ball. After a moment, the crystal ball revealed an image of the intruders. At the same time, Rakikan's face distorted. I have to contact the Grand Duke. That magic power isn't flowing out. Sniff. What? Sniff. Sniff Sniff turned restlessly. He had nothing more to say. Rakakan frowned. He didn't know what they did, but something seemed to be blocking the magic power from going outside. It was impossible to contact anyone. There was no other way. There were a few items at the Demon World auction that would help in this situation, but he hadn't bought them. It can't be helped. Gather all the creatures together. I just need to defeat them directly. Rakakan made a decision. The enemies invading were very different from the humans. He had no confidence in stopping them. Rakikan's gaze naturally turned in one direction. I might have to unlock Gustart's seal. He didn't know what the aftermath would do to his dungeon, but it was better than losing it to the enemy. Especially when considering the ones hitting the dungeon. The dark elf he saw at the Demon World auction. Was her name Chrisley? And Chrisley accompanied only one demon. Randolph Brigzeal. He had struck him in the back of the head. What was his purpose? Quickly. Yes. Sniff. Rakakan gritted his teeth. Was this what it felt like when an enemy came to his front yard and he couldn't stop it? Chrisley had some sympathy for him. A good army. She had brought more than half of Dungeon Master's power, so there was no way Rakakan could stop them. This was a force that would threaten a duke or even a Grand Duke. Chrisley was convinced as she had looked around the dungeons of the Grand Dukes. It took less than half an hour for them to pass through half of the 20 floors. 1 hour passed rapidly. The remnants. Chrisley clicked her tongue while looking at the outer wall of the dungeon. It was due to the discovery of a creature who escaped the dungeon and was flying through the sky. It was inevitable that the creature would deliver the news to Grand Duke Upa. Chrisley couldn't allow it to leave. She raised her wand and a black crow flew quickly. It instantly snatched the flying-type creature. As a result, communication with the outside was completely cut off. A matter of time. The only thing left is to lure Gustarte. In the first place, she never paid attention to Rakikan's defense. Chrisley was completely focused on Gustarte, the mysterious magician of the moon. Dungeon Master told her to be careful. He was an opponent she couldn't be defenseless against. He was a powerful opponent that was even a match for Dungeon Master. She needed to move cautiously. All the possibilities needed to be accounted for in order to catch him. That would start from this point onwards. It would take a certain amount of sacrifices. However, achieving the goal with minimal damage was also important. The army gathered here was a significant portion of Dungeon Master's forces. If they were lost, then it would be a huge blow. At least, it was obvious that Dungeon Master would be on the defensive. She didn't doubt that he would rise above all the hardships if such a thing happened, but such a situation didn't need to be created. She would do her best to get the optimal results. Quaru room. The dungeon shook tremendously. The high-class creatures and Rakikan's army were finally colliding. I have to prepare. Chrisley pulled out some small stones. They were stones that could contain magic power. Garnak, the king of death. Chrisley had inherited his strength. However, his strength was quite unusual. The magic power was gathered for special situations like this. It would deal a big blow to her. After it woke up in her, she gathered it little by little. However, she decided to release it all this time. It was enough magic power to even take down a great number of high-class creatures. She set up camp on the ground. She took out 3 wands and created magic circles. The short preparations were over. Now, she just had to wait for the end of the battle. How many minutes will they hold out for? 10 minutes? 20 minutes? They pushed ahead with pure force. She didn't like it very much, but it was efficient. Dungeon Master valued swiftness and efficiency. It was hard to manage many dungeons, but it wasn't strange for Grand Dukes to have 1 or 2 more. And Chrisley's expectations weren't that far off the mark. 15 minutes later, the dungeon became silent. The battle was over. There were no more creatures left to attack them. Now I have to lure Gustarte. Half of the plan was successful. However, in the meantime, Chrisley frowned. She was reading the flow of a vast amount of magic power. The magic power was very pure and intense. It was enough to even break the shield protecting the dungeon. Quirk, a short, thick sound. The 20th floor disappeared without a trace. The sky was black and there was a huge moon. It meant Gustart's seal had been released. Kuong. The first thing that fell from the top floor of the dungeon was the Titan. It slammed into the ground, causing it to shake like an earthquake had occurred. Its chest was moving up and down like it was breathing, so the Titan didn't seem to be dead. One arm had disappeared. How? It was obvious that it was the work of Gustarte. She hadn't expected this type of impact. Soon the high-class creatures started to rampage. The griffin aimed lightning and flames while the Hydra restored the 7 heads that were cut off. Rakikan and his subordinates couldn't be seen anywhere. I can't stay still. At this point, she no longer needed to block her magic power. She gathered her magic power and channeled it into the 3 circles. It wasn't unexpected. Anyway, after Gustarte appeared, he was moved to the place where Chrisley was. The creatures recovered their spirits and moved according to the plan. After gathering the magic power, Chrisley grabbed the small stones. They were a secret weapon that Dungeon Master made directly from secret materials. It wasn't long before Gustarte would arrive here. The creatures need to buy some time. The 3 magic circles shone. Her magic power was amplified and exploded. Chrisley moved the magic power into the little stones. The stones devoured the magic power. Queen of the Sun and Moon. Chrisley cried out as the stones swallowed the magic power. Her strongest skill, Queen of the Sun and the Moon, epic. When the 2 opposing magic powers were added to the stones, they repeatedly burned and cooled. Now even Chrisley wouldn't be able to control the magic power contained in the stones. If this continued, then they would burst. Chrisley turned her gaze towards Gustarte and used a skill. Kying. Soon, a laser-like beam shot out from the stones and reached Gustarte at a tremendous speed. Swa. Gustarte momentarily paused as the magic hit him. It was contradictory since he normally ignored all physical attacks and skills. Magic power poured out from the stones and bound Gustarte. This process was repeated many times in the blink of an eye. There is an effect. It was the power of the stones. Chrisley instinctively realized that the stones would only stop him for a short period of time. Scatter. Once Gustart's movements were stopped, the creatures urgently rushed away. They had to get out of the dungeon as soon as possible. Only the ones with good maneuverability were left behind. Just a little bit more. Every now and then, Gustarte showed some little movements. It would only last dozens of minutes at best. But there were no more methods. She just had to wait and hope. The creatures succeeded in escaping the dungeon. At the same time, Gustarte got free and started acting. The scene was like a miracle as Chrisley's hands started sweating. Since the ground-based creatures scattered, only the maneuverable airborne ones were left behind to lure Gustarte. Dungeon Master was coming using the Bone Dragon's speed, so Gustarte had to stay trapped until then. At the very least, the Griffin and King Wyvern would be able to keep up with Gustarte. There was even a bone dragon here. It was funny that all this power was here, but they were only focused on distracting the opponent. That's it, Chrisley coolly commenced with the plan. Gustarte had no idea after losing all his ego. Even though they were luring him, he showed no signs of stopping. The target place had hundreds of small stones scattered. Gustarte entered this place. If a few stones could seal his movements for dozens of minutes, hundreds would be able to semi-permanently seal him. The giant slime is an item from the gods. Chrisley laughed at Gustarte from the back of the griffin. A giant slime. It was once a big headache for a duke's dungeon, and it was now dungeon master's armor. Greed. A few remnants of it had been picked up. This was the identity of the stones. They might be the remnants of a fake greed, but the stones were quite effective on Gustarte. In Dungeon Master's previous confrontation with Gustarte, he said that his armor wasn't seriously damaged. He focused on that to create a method to counter Gustarte. It was great in hindsight. They would have received serious damage without it. She really respected this part. Success. Chrisley nodded. They finally succeeded in attracting the target to the desired place. It wasn't without damage, but the result was very good. Now everything would be perfect if the seal succeeded. Chrisley thought of it as a huge mountain range. It was a spell that was invoked by the hundreds of greeds planted throughout the mountain range. And the spell was quite simple. The magic power of the stones was already connected to Chrisley. Then Chrisley opened her mouth. Invoke. Swa. The entire mountain range turned red. Intense light was emitted from hundreds of stones towards Gustarte. The magic spell surrounded Gustarte and greedily swallowed his magic power. The result was a great success. I folded my arms. I stared at the place where Gustarte had collapsed. The night sky had cleared up. The moon had lost its light. It was simply Gustarte. It has been a while. I laughed. I wasn't expecting an answer. A god had fallen to the ground and seemed no different from a mortal. His body was shivering like a wet lamb. Even though all the magic power is blocked, he still hasn't gained his awareness as a god? It was questionable. In other words, it meant that magic power wasn't controlling Gustarte. I wondered about the method to control a god. I had met a big rabbit in the reverse world. 0001 called it an infection. The program was a word that emerged from his mouth. It meant controlling Gustarte did simply involve magic power. There was a slightly different, more unconventional way. It would be close to the secrets of the gods, meaning that Upa almost succeeded in tasting the fruit of the gods. This happened in my previous life. It was the strongest aerial Diablo. But in this life, Okulos and Upa were the ones involved. I had directly punished Okulos, but if a similar thing happened again, I would have to be careful when striking Upa. Good job. I turned and looked at Chrisley. I was just doing my job, my dungeon master. Chrisley responded roughly. Her complexion made it seem like she was going to collapse soon. Some creatures were half dead before they managed to get Gustarte in the circle. I wasn't greatly affected due to infinity armor. This was a phenomenon confirmed by several experiments. It was because infinity armor was made out of Greed's body. The damage? Gigantes died and 30 advanced creatures were killed. There are approximately 20 seriously injured. Except for the dead, all the other creatures have succeeded in escaping. Ho! My mouth formed a thin line. This was a great success. I honestly expected that I would lose more than half. It was obvious for a meeting like this. However, the task was accomplished with far less damages than expected. Chrisley had played a large role in this. Still, the death of Gigantes made me cold. It is regrettable since he was pretty loyal. Bury his body next to the tree of origin. Chrisley went down on one knee. I will follow your command, my dungeon master. Make a comfortable spot for the rest of the dead creatures. Yes? Joy appeared on Chrisley's face. Was it due to my attitude towards the creatures? Anyway, her performance was very commendable. Those who made great achievements should have suitable rewards. They would receive a burial place near the tree of origin. Being buried at the tree of origin was considered a great honor among the creatures. I set the rule that this wasn't allowed for just anyone. Thanks to that, I was able to achieve this level of admiration. It was a welcome thing for me. There wouldn't be any separate troubles. Middle rank god, Gustarte. I pulled out the moon arrow. He was half caught due to greed, so the arrow would surely work. I didn't know what the effect was, but the legend-ranked item would surely do something. Bururu. The tip of the arrow trembled. The key to solving the arrow was in the arrowhead. It was a matter of seeing whether Gustart's ego would be restored like 0001 said. If there is no effect, it would be good if that happened. There were many things I wanted to try with Gustarte. The body of a god was so rare that it couldn't be found anywhere else in the world. I'm sorry, but I can't keep my promise for now. I laughed and put the moon arrow away again. I made a promise with 0001, but a time wasn't set. I wouldn't fulfill my promise to use the moon arrow until I fully experimented with Gustart's body that was a god. There is a familiar feeling to him. This feeling, the Hell Monarch. He wasn't sane right now, but he somewhat resembled the Hell Monarch. My heart was beating wildly, so it wasn't unrelated. However, the Hell Monarch was someone who failed to become a god. Now a real god had fallen in front of my eyes, so I wanted to know the reason why. I changed my mind. I originally intended to use the arrow, but not anymore. The secrets of the gods were also interesting. In addition, I intended to figure out the method that Upa used. It was necessary to dig the secrets out of Gustarte. I will get his body. I turned back to Chrisley. Tie him up using Greed's stones. Drag him to the dungeon for separate research. Leave it with the Lich, but you should participate. I will do so, my dungeon master. It is only my guess, but you should be able to obtain a lot if you study Gustarte. The Lich will like it. Gaparam, the Lich studying the homunculus, would joyfully jump at this chance. Creating a true homunculus was challenging the realm of the gods. He couldn't get anywhere without seeing a god itself. Furthermore, it would be a good experience for Chrisley in many ways. My dungeon master, are there any specific areas of research that you want? I stopped a smile from forming. Her eyes seemed pretty interested. Based on Chrisley expressing these words, it seemed like there was an experiment she wanted to try. Just dig into the secrets of the gods, including how Upa managed to control him. Add this to the research. Chrisley was overflowing with motivation. I pulled out the moon arrow again and handed it to Chrisley. I feel an amazing divine power. The moon arrow is an item. It is legend grade and originally intended for Gustarte. If this arrow touches Gustart's body, then his condition should improve. However, that should only be done at the end. We can't study him if he recovers his divinity. I will keep that in mind. This arrow should be investigated separately. Yes. Chrisley nodded to all my words. Chrisley liked research, so she didn't mind being given this mission. I had no doubt that there would be a good outcome. I didn't mind even if there weren't significant results. The secrets of a god weren't that easy to find. I will return to Greenwich Observatory. Wait for my return at the dungeon. Please be safe. No one will harm me. I know. She didn't doubt my strength. No matter what dangerous situations arose, I had the power to protect myself. Chrisley was well aware of this. After I confirmed that Gustarte was restrained, I turned around. I couldn't leave my position there for too long. And this uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. Yi stood on the clock tower of Greenwich Observatory in the guise of the dungeon master. The dungeon master had crossed arms and a stern expression, but there was a sense of discomfort when looking closer. Oswin advised, "Don't say anything and stay calm," but it was unclear if she could follow those instructions. Moreover, the surrounding gazes were irritating. Hying, Yi inwardly cried out. Her mouth drooped down a little bit. It was awkward due to the unfamiliar body, and she couldn't even stand properly. Creatures were hiding all over the castle. Now they were simultaneously staring at the dungeon master. There seemed to be dozens, perhaps hundreds. Their gazes were casual, so it was like she was sitting on a thorny cushion. Yi couldn't be blamed for feeling uncomfortable. Grand Duke Randolph Brigzeal. Then someone suddenly appeared next to her. A silver knight with a white emblem. It was one of Ariel Diablo's aides that she had seen a few times. Yi involuntarily swallowed her saliva. She didn't know what to do in this situation. She hadn't been aware that someone would casually walk over and just talk to her. Yi's face distorted before returning to normal. She didn't say anything. Now she had no choice but to follow Oswin's words to stay silent. Master is taciturn, so it doesn't matter. Besides, this was the position of a Grand Duke. There was no need to be friendly to an opponent. Excuse me, but when are you going to move? Ariel Diablo said that you wouldn't continue to stay here. Unless there is a special reason. It felt like thorns had entered her mouth. She wanted to answer, but she knew her own bad habits. She couldn't stop herself from saying, "Yeehee." Oh my god, Master saying yeehee. She couldn't even imagine it. She didn't even want to imagine him with such a habit. The Silver Knight continued talking as there was no response. She added that staying here means you won't have any good intentions. I hope that we can continue our good relationship with Grand Duke Randolph Brigzeal. Please tell us why you have blocked the nearby magic power. For a moment, it seemed like you were going somewhere else and didn't want to be tracked. It was very blatant. The question being asked was very blatant. And the Silver Knight was waiting for an answer. Tell me what you were doing. How should she answer? At any rate, Yeehee was certain that the Silver Knight wasn't stupid. There was no answer, so the Silver Knight took one step back. If you don't say anything, then I will tell Ariel Diablo. Yeehee's eyes twitched. If the opponent received the wrong meaning, then an irreversible misunderstanding might occur. No, it was likely to happen. Ariel Diablo hadn't showed any intentions to touch Master. She acted friendly towards him. But what would happen if the opponent's attitude changed? Master was sure to scold Yeehee. Therefore, Yeehee tried to speak as sternly as possible. I, for a moment, went to drink honey water. Yeehee. Chapter 214 to 215, Arc. The Silver Knight hesitated. Leaving the position to grab honey water didn't make sense. If he wanted, then his subordinates would instantly grab honey water for him. Furthermore, he added, Yeehee, to his sentence. The Silver Knight couldn't help feeling misgivings. Yeehee swiftly realized her mistake and explained. It was for Yeehee. Yeehee, my lovely fairy. Lovely? The Silver Knight showed signs of distrust. Confusion was also visible. Grand Duke Randolph Brigzeal. As of now, he was the most famous of the demons. As a demon, he wasn't the type to use the word lovely. However, Yeehee didn't pay attention to the Silver Knight's reaction and improvised. Listen well to my words. My Yeehee, she is the best fairy. I understand. The Silver Knight had nothing more to say. She had made a decision. Then, I will tell Ariel Diablo that Randolph Brigzeal left to get honey water for his lovely fairy Yeehee. Yeehee didn't sense the sarcasm and nodded. The Silver Knight stiffened with surprise. Can I really say that? Yeehee quietly looked at the Silver Knight. The Silver Knight didn't speak anymore. There must be a reason for this behavior. He is Randolph Brigzeal, were her thoughts. His appearance was so different from what had been seen before. Out of all the demons, he was the one with the most overwhelming charisma. It was natural to think there might be a trick. Of course, Yeehee had no idea and just wanted to praise herself while looking like Master. However, the Silver Knight obviously misunderstood. The Silver Knight bowed and left. Yeehee. Now Yeehee's mouth loosened. She was proud of herself for crossing that hill unharmed. However, nobody knew what Ariel Diablo's reaction to this would be. There was a little angel. He was looking down at the ground from the sky while wearing a crown made of grass. Around him, numerous angels were engaged in a fierce battle with the creatures. But apart from that, the little angel had a very gentle look. His appearance was cute like a cupid, but an air of nobility was felt from him. Hash was a top-rank cherub. At present, he was leading them on behalf of the angels and was playing the role of commander. Even though he didn't know everything about strategy, the other angels helped clean things up nicely. He was young, but the angel hierarchy was strict. 93rd Unit, destroyed by Upa Bulanon. 77th Unit, engaging in a fight with Ariel Diablo. Assemble all nearby troops. 33rd Unit, there were battles going on, but they didn't forget to report back. Numerous commanding angels hurried to Hash and suggested what to do. All Hash needed was to give consent. Even if he couldn't speak, his will was naturally transmitted to them. Hash, a throne's angel also in the upper hierarchy called Opinion, talked to him. The angel with huge wings approached with a resigned expression. As Hash shifted his glance, Opinion continued talking. The situation isn't good. I will lead the troops and punish the seeds of darkness. Like his words, the worst situation was currently happening on the battlefield. In particular, Ariel Diablo and Upa Bulanon's presences were very difficult. The two Grand Dukes were annihilating the angels, so the momentum was with them. At this rate, the damage would only increase. It wouldn't be a bad choice for the throne's angel to move and try to overturn the situation. Opinion confronting the Grand Dukes was an option. Hash closed his eyes. It wasn't long after he was born, but Hash absorbed everything faster than anyone else. He finished understanding the life and death battlefield, and realized what qualities were needed for a leader. There were 3 types of angels in the upper hierarchy, and the cherub was near the top. Only the seraphim and celestial ruler were higher than them. There were only 2 seraphims. There was 1 celestial ruler, and Opinion was one of 5 thrones. Truly the best of the best. It was natural that his speed of learning would be extraordinary. Even so, there was still a lack of experience. This was a battlefield that wouldn't even tolerate one mistake. Right now a decision was needed. And it needed to give the best outcome. The best outcome was killing as many creatures and demons as possible. He received a message from his master, Randolph Brigzeal. Sending Opinion right now was the worst option. He needed to lead the battlefield until the end. Randolph Brigzeal was a warrior who knew more about the battlefield than Hash. Hash couldn't stop here. Hash opened his eyes. As he felt thousands of eyes looking at him, Hash sent them a short message. It was permission to use the Ark. After Grand Duke Upa swept through, Yu Hai and her party were able to speed up a little more. The road to reach the center was hard and long, but they couldn't give up. However, there were some regrets. If they failed, they regretted not taking out Upa and his demons when there was the chance. It really was a golden opportunity while he was fighting the angels. Upa and his demons wouldn't have noticed. All the team members would have been swept away by the explosion, but they could have killed a Grand Duke and many demons. No, I can't give up hope just to catch one of them. Yu Hai hardened her heart every time she felt this. Sometimes creatures and angels moved like they were scouting. There was no need for the party to worry too much. Angels wouldn't attack humans first, and the creatures wandering weren't strong. At this rate, we will arrive at our destination in 3 hours. Our ultimate goal is to plant hope at the destination and return as quickly as possible. There must be no one who falls behind. Yu Hai spoke from the front. She had given this warning several times. 3 hours. 3 hours spent in hell. Everything around them was the enemy. There were many opponents they couldn't afford to cross. If their luck was bad enough to get caught by a scout, they could lose both hope and their lives. Yu Hai continued encouraging her team members. The story that they could win, that they were humanity's hope. It didn't alleviate the grim atmosphere. It had been too shocking. The sight of Upa wiping out the angels alone. It was enough to plant the perception of being untouchable in the hearts of the humans. Wait, what is that? What? The party stopped moving. Everyone was looking at one point with their mouths wide open. They were highly trained elites. Yet Yu Hai and the members were all amazed at what they saw. It floated in the sky. Even though it was a considerable distance away, the object was so big that it was visible to the naked eye. It is a ship, Kim Yura said with a strange expression. That's right, a ship, a wooden ship floating in the sky. It looked like a normal ship, except for the fact that it was big enough to cover the sun. Please don't be a bad sign. Yu Hai barely suppressed her sigh as she stared at the sky. Unexpected things kept on happening. She was extremely worried about whether they could reach their destination safely. Upa shifted his gaze from the angel whose wings he was tearing towards the sky. Something moderately interesting showed up. Upa laughed roughly. He had been bored hunting ordinary angels. His opponents were only mid-rank angels and soldiers, with no high-ranking angels being sent out. It tasted of hunting. The plan was obviously to consume a lot of his energy. However, Upa followed this plan despite it being obvious. He thought that the real opponents would come out if he kept on slaughtering the angels. And, it seemed like the real thing had now appeared. Turn around. From now on, I will take over the ship. There were some Cerberuses with black wings. The symbol of Upa, the huge castle Bulanon, was painted on their collars. Upa's hundreds of thousands of creatures started to move. There was a half-smile on Upa's face. He desired that ship, so he would capture it directly. It was a ship made by angels, but he thought it would be temporarily useful while he didn't have Bulanon. Upa already imagined standing in the center of that ship. Ho, Ariel Diablo. She had stopped hunting and was resting for a while. The angels had only sent weak soldiers. There was a huge difference between them, so she lost interest. She was just watching Upa hunt when a ship appeared in the sky. Ariel Diablo raised her ivory sword. A sword made of Balrog ivory. A hazy bone armor was also around Ariel Diablo. The bone armor wrapped around her whole body and there was a long tail. The bone helmet seemed to look like a dragon's head and her magic power naturally dominated the surroundings. Let's go. I deserve that angel ship. Chiok, Chiok. The Silver Knights lined up behind her. An answer wasn't required. They only acted according to her will. Ariel Diablo kicked off from the ground. Wind blew up the dust as she instantly disappeared. The Ark was a hidden card made by the angels. They gathered holy power and plants together to make it complete with wings. There were all types of magic and holy powers to stop the darkness, so the Grand Duke's strikes wouldn't break it so easily. There were 50,000 angels on the Ark. The angels started to fire the cannons on the Ark at the creatures. Kung, Kwang. Those directly hit by the shells disappeared without leaving any traces behind. The airborne creatures attempted to attack from the sky, but the shield of holy power intercepted them. The evil creatures couldn't stand touching it and received wounds that couldn't be healed. Even so, there were more high-ranking creatures wiped out by the angels guarding the ship. There were 20,000 angels protecting the ship. They wandered around the ship and killed any creature trying to pierce through the shield. It was a dramatic reversal from the angels' previous state of being slaughtered. Dumb guys. Grand Duke Upa watched the ship. He was disappointed in the demons hitting the Ark. Even though he had entrusted this task to them, not one of them was able to scratch the Ark. The capabilities of his demons seemed to be inferior when compared to the vassals of the other Grand Dukes. I don't like it. He had no favorites among the demons. The creatures were like consumable items, while the demons would be together with him until their deaths. Yet they were like this. He needed competent subordinates. In that sense, Gustarte is the best sword and shield for me. He would make Upa the best. Not a demon but a god. A demon becoming a god. Just thinking about it made his body heat up. Kwang. However, the sound of the Ark returned Upa to reality. Dozens of wyverns were thrown to the ground. The other creatures were crushed to death because of the wyverns. Of course, not all of his subordinates were useless. Some high-ranking demons were battling the angels. There was someone who used the huge flying beast, Golgan, to push the Ark. But there was no meaning to it if not all of his subordinates were competent. Upa personally didn't like this. Get out of the way. I will take care of it. Upa immediately pushed aside the one commanding and came forward. He didn't like what he saw in front of him but he couldn't waste time. He would use a blitz attack to finish it quickly. It was best to start quickly and finish fast. There were many ways to end it quickly but the best way was to show the overwhelming difference in strength. Heeing. Upa waved his hand and strong winds started blowing. Soon dozens of typhoons emerged and danced around Upa's right hand. A huge typhoon was creature once they were joined together. The ship looks good. Upa rode the typhoon into the sky. He felt some comfort that he would be able to obtain the ship in a good condition. At that time, Pandemonium and his army hadn't moved far from Greenwich Observatory. He had no interest in the fighting as his gaze was only directed towards the observatory. Randolph Brigzeal was a significant demon. The angels weren't high risk compared to him. He had dealt with one of the Grand Dukes, Okulos. There was no guarantee he wouldn't act against the other Grand Dukes. As one of the oldest demons, Okulos was careful about everything. Some might say he was scared, but that cautiousness allowed him to maintain his position as Grand Duke for a long time. Does he really hold the key? His mind was filled with other thoughts while he went through the motions of fighting the angels. It started with the invitation, but the true beginning was the special event. A few lines of words had appeared in front of all the Grand Dukes. And then the assault of the angels started. It isn't clear. The first special event was the emergence of the angels. This assault might also be one. It seemed suspicious but he wasn't sure how. He couldn't erase the feeling that someone had deliberately created this situation. Then he needed to look at who would gain the most from this. Randolph Brigzeal. That guy. If the Grand Duke's troops were reduced then the most profitable one would be Randolph Brigzeal who had no faction. However, the angels wouldn't listen to a demon and they didn't seem like they were being used. So Pandemonium decided to save as much power as possible. If Randolph Brigzeal did anything then he would be able to respond flexibly. or pandemonium would surround Greenwich Observatory and stop him from moving. Humans. In the meantime, a dozen humans entered Pandemonium's field of vision. The intelligence of humans was amazing, so there was no reason for them to not notice this battlefield. Still, it was strange. Why would humans be here? Why would humans risk themselves to enter here? Inferior organisms. All they could do was accept their fate. Furthermore, the movements of the humans were careful. It was clear that they were trying to do something. I need to find out. Pandemonium raised his hand. It was necessary to find out about any ambiguous occurrences. Then he could align the unseen puzzle pieces. He knew from long years of experience that it was better to be as careful as possible. Quang. Suddenly there was a sound from the sky. Huge flames hit the ark. The problem was where the flames were launched from. Pandemonium turned his head. He is doing moderately well. There was an unmistakable man not far from here. Randolph Brigzeal. Despite not being close to it at all, he had attacked the ark. He thought Randolph Brigzeal would continue to stay in the castle. Pandemonium, aren't you interested in hunting the angels? That guy turned and proudly spoke to him. It was natural for demons and angels to confront each other. A desire to hunt was also natural. It wasn't surprising for him to be rebuked for not moving. Yet Randolph Brigzeal was the one saying it. He was someone who had only stayed in the castle so far. I want to have a good time. Don't you think this isn't as entertaining as the banquet? Are you trying to play word games with me now? Pandemonium frowned. He didn't want to get caught up in that guy's pace. Randolph Brigzeal might be young, but he was surprisingly tricky. He likely had a separate purpose for this conversation. It is a joke. Aren't we close friends? Shut up if you are just going to continue with the useless barking. Come back after you hunt all the angels. If I can't, then isn't it impossible for you? Impossible? Pandemonium's expression hardened. He hadn't expected the conversation to head in this direction. That's why Pandemonium thought the words were a joke. It will be a big deal if I take action. It doesn't seem like a big deal to me. You will see after finding the way back to the demon world. If you're not lying, then all the others won't stay still. A smile suddenly appeared on that guy's face. Demon world. I won't have any regrets about going there. Right, you are just an idiotic demon who is alone. You don't deserve to be formally called a Grand Duke. But I see Grand Duke in my status window. How is that possible if it isn't true? It is a virtual one. The demon world won't recognize you as a Grand Duke. I won't stay as a Grand Duke forever. In that sense, our wills match. If he didn't stay as a Grand Duke, it meant he would become the Demon King. He left after saying those leisurely words. It seemed like he was going to find a nice place to watch the battlefield. Pandemonium shook his head. That guy had moved away from the castle, so there was no reason to stay here. In any case, it was necessary to finish this fight quickly. I will start hunting the angels. Spread out, as you command, as you command. Pandemonium's demons moved with their assigned creatures. Pandemonium was proud of the quality of his demons compared to the other Grand Dukes. They were all competent and did the required work without him needing to order them. After a while, only a handful of creatures and the doll-like demons taken from Okuyo's faction were remaining. They won't be able to endure. Pandemonium closed his eyes. If he joined, then the hunt would soon be over. I shrugged. It was a dangerous moment. Pandemonium had noticed the humans. I knew exactly what they were carrying and what their plan was. I had sent them Kim Yura and Kim Minji so that they could move as safely as possible. I don't know how much hope that bomb will be. Humans named it Hope, so it didn't seem entirely useless. Anyway, entering the battlefield was the right decision. Thanks to that, I was able to confirm some good information from Pandemonium. He must be looking for a way to the demon world. The path to the demon world. This was possible if I could use Yihi. Perhaps it was the purpose of the special event. Yihi had the ability to move an opponent to the place they originally came from. I wonder what happened to the demon world. It must be very important for them to move in such a hurry. I slowly headed towards the center of the battlefield like I was taking a walk while lost in thought. I continued to speculate on Pandemonium's words. The demons won't acknowledge me as a Grand Duke. In contrast, the other Grand Dukes have enough forces to be acknowledged. In a nutshell, the strength of my forces isn't something that the demon world can overlook. That's why I had to go back properly. The power of the demon world would support the winner when they became the devil. Without power, I would become a puppet devil. Or I would be hunted by other forces. Therefore I had concentrated on growing my dungeons. They would become my power when I became the Demon King. I got good information and stopped him from obtaining a clue. It was a rewarding experience. I looked up at the sky. I was able to confirm that Pandemonium had joined the battlefield. The hunting would end soon. Unless a small conflict upset the balance. Chapter 216 to 218, Hope. The beginning was simple. Capture the Ark. However, a relationship between two people soon became a big obstacle. Ariel Diablo, Upa Bulanon. The two of them were at war. They cut down each other's forces and plotted against each other. After arriving here, it was tacitly agreed that they wouldn't fight. But that was nothing more than putting out an urgent fire. The fire roared up even bigger. It wasn't a concern until it became a big problem. The result was, there were no surprising results. The confrontation between the two was taken for granted. In terms of sheer numbers, Upa was the winner. However, Ariel was far ahead in terms of quality. In addition, Ariel's faction were waiting nearby. The simple confrontation between demons and angels spread in a totally different direction. This is the most fun thing in the world. I was remaining still. Once this happened, the only one hunting the angels was Pandemonium. It would be easy if all the Grand Dukes were facing one enemy, but Pandemonium was forced to take on the angels alone. I was a bystander. I hadn't brought that many creatures here in the first place. Many had gone to face the Magician of the Moon and were injured. I decided to go watch the fight between Ariel Diablo and Upa Bulanon. If I was noticed, then I could just pretend to hunt the angels. Besides, I was the only one who could open the path for them. I wouldn't be outright attacked just yet. The fire spread and no one could stop it. Are you going to ride the angel's ship? It is only suitable for being burnt. Ariel was insistent. She had the bloodline of a devil and had a very bad opinion of angels. Isn't the angel's ship still a ship? It is very good. This bitch, your eyes are already rotten. Upa didn't change his opinion. Most of the angels on the ark were removed. Now the only decision remaining was to own or burn the ship. But the differences in opinion between the two couldn't be narrowed. It wasn't a big deal, but the Grand Dukes had a lot of pride. They had no hesitation about fighting between each other. A way to solve this problem exists traditionally. Upa Bulanon, I will end you here. Ariel Diablo raised her ivory sword. Balrog, a sword made from the ivory of one of the strongest creatures. It was the Balrog's bad luck that it was said to have been destroyed by the devil due to its strength. Their population was low, so I was curious about how she obtained this sword on Earth. Okay, I will welcome any fight from this bitch. Upa laughed wildly, revealing his teeth. Hundreds of thousands of troops emerged simultaneously. Ariel Diablo's army numbered approximately 5,000. Even if there was a qualitative difference, it was hard to bridge this absolute number difference. In other words, this was likely to be Ariel Diablo's grave. Vasak Mentum, you will take the vanguard. He was one of the dukes. Upa put him in the front as a vanguard. The huge ark had crashed to the ground. A huge war between Ariel and Upa was occurring. A demon fight was very simple. Gather, fight, crush. It was the tradition of the demons to pour all their power in until the opponent was completely destroyed. There were rarely any fights on a small scale. It might be like a duel between nobles, but an aspect involved a war of attrition. Now the two of them had started a traditional fight. In conclusion, they would end up using all their strength. Upa had overwhelming numbers, but I guessed the odds of him winning is 6-4. The difference in numbers couldn't be ignored, and I could see that Upa's side was a little superior. However, Ariel wouldn't have decided to fight if she didn't think there was a chance of winning. Good, this couldn't be better for me. Both of their strengths would be shaved for me. One person might be able to fight back, but the damage would be considerable. If so, it wouldn't take Pandemonium that long. He also couldn't afford to deal with the angels alone. Perhaps the one most confused about this situation right now was Pandemonium. Thanks to me, he couldn't stand still and engaged in an all-out war with the angels. It was clear that the angels had glimpsed an opportunity in the battle between the two Grand Dukes. I expected that there might be a conflict, but I didn't think it would explode like this. I was satisfied and would love to watch this fight. However, I felt like I had to go to the next step. Then, I turned my head away. I was looking at a little figure covered in a cloak behind me. Rose. She took it off when I called out her name. Rose. The dark elf female that was Roy's twin. Originally she should be in Korea, but I specifically called her. Rose grinned after her head was revealed by the cloak. Yes, master. Follow me. Yes, master. Be on the lookout for the rest of the angels. There is no need to actively fight. White will lead the saber tigers and attract the angels here. There were hundreds of newly born white tigers that grew rapidly in the dungeon. As one of the main creatures, I decided to use White and the saber tigers as bait. I intended to attract the angels to this place and make the fight between the two even more dramatic. I had brought approximately 3,000 creatures to Greenwich Observatory. Most of them were intermediate to advanced level creatures. There were many saber tigers mixed in among them. There wouldn't be any difficulties in carrying out the operation. Gurung, White briefly cried out. Then he quickly disappeared from my field of view. Not to be outdone by him, I also moved. Now it is time for the item to be delivered. My cheeks were itchy with impatience. I needed the humans' hope to achieve another purpose. By now, they should have reached their goal at Greenwich Observatory. The situation on the battlefield was urgent, so Yu Un-hai was forced to move faster. There was a battlefield where it was difficult to predict even 1 second ahead. A field where kings were fighting. There was a high possibility that they would become caught in the middle. Being caught up in it would just cause their deaths. There is an underground passage that is connected to the basement of Greenwich Observatory. There won't be many creatures and we can leave after installing Hope in the center. Only a bit more to go. The place where they were currently standing was a ruin. However, there was a gap between the buildings. That gap was the underground passageway connected to Greenwich Observatory. Yu Un-hai and her team started removing the wreckage. Afterwards, they entered the passageway without releasing any of their tension. The passage was naturally dark. If they weren't awakened, then they wouldn't have been able to see in front of them. Thanks to going beyond the limits of a human, they were able to find their way in the dark. The communication got cut off. Their line to the guild master Kim Yong-woo was disconnected. Yu Un-hai ignored it and just focused on the darkness around her. From now on, no outside assistance should be expected. They had to overcome this ordeal by themselves. Duck, Duke. Their footsteps could be heard. Sick, squeak squeak. There was a lot of rainwater and rats. It seemed like this place had been abandoned for a long time. Yu Un-hai had seen so many horrible things that she wasn't surprised by rats anymore. She moved while preparing for any attacks from creatures. There is no reason for them to not know about the passage under the observatory. That's why she couldn't release her tension. If she built a castle, then it would have an underground area. She would know all the places connected to the underground and would put guards on it in advance. It wasn't strange, but no matter how far they went, no creatures could be seen. The only living organisms were rats. Is it this easy? She frowned. No creatures had emerged in this long passage. There were no defenses at all. Trap? It was a possibility. However, demons wouldn't bother waiting for a trap. Rather, it was more convenient and effective to place a few creatures to protect the underground. Nuna, I don't have a good feeling. Edward spoke carefully. There are no creatures. Even if there are none, I don't feel good. There is no other road but this one. It is impossible to enter Greenwich Observatory from the normal methods. She also didn't have a good feeling. Yu Un-hai turned her head and looked at the team members once again. They all had nervous expressions on their faces. Now was the peak of their mission. And Kim Yura's expression was dark in another manner. Apology? Guilt? She is probably just nervous. There was no time to dig into the details. Yu Un-hai turned back to the front and started moving forward. She had memorized the path of the passage in advance. There were no obstacles blocking their path. At that time, they heard a voice in the darkness. Stop. At first, she mistook it for a hallucination. But the voice of a woman clearly entered their ears. I told you to stop. On the other side of the passage. They were almost at their target when someone showed up. Yu Un-hai and Edward's eyes widened as they saw the person. The others were puzzled and vigilant. But for Yu Un-hai and Edward, that presence wasn't normal. Rose Nim? Yes, it's been a while. Rose completely removed her cloak as she came closer. The young lady was holding a long scythe in one hand. Yu Un-hai asked with amazement. Why is Rose Nim here? Master told me to come. Yes? By the way, am I scary? Why are you so cautious? Rose Nim shouldn't be here. Or, did you come with the savior? Rose was confused. Savior? Ah, tilde, that is him. By the way, is that big thing Hope? Rose pointed towards one of the team members with her scythe. Two members were carrying something. But Yu Un-hai tensed up even more at Rose's words. Why did she know the name Hope? Only a very small number of people, including Kim Yong-woo, knew that name. Yu Un-hai formed tight fists and said, "That's correct." Wa tilde, really? Master, it is correct. Rose turned her head and cried out. Who was behind her? Yu Un-hai's question was answered in a matter of seconds. A shadow showed up behind Rose. Yu Un-hai was shocked after seeing the shadow. It was a man wearing a skull mask. A key figure in the guild who always disappeared, yet would reappear whenever they needed him. People kept on saying he was dead. He had a tendency to move alone until he finally died when exploring a dungeon. Another time was due to a monster wave. At any rate, the majority of people thought he was dead. Since then, Korea was invaded by demons and overwhelmed. Countless people died and cities were destroyed. Every time, Yu Un-hai and other awakened always thought he would return. He always appeared when they were facing danger. But he did not appear. The demons unleashed a large number of creatures and devastated Korea. So his presence was slowly forgotten. It has been a while. Yu Un-hai, Edward Windsor. The man took off his mask. At that moment, Yu Un-hai's eyes shook. Ah, that face, she was sure of it. There was no mistaking it. It was a face she had memorized and seen many times. He was the one who found Yu Un-hai and built up her foundation. The man who led her from the front. He also caused Edward's talents to bloom. Alive, you are alive. Yu Un-hai spoke with as much calm as possible. She wasn't her old self. The playful and bright Yu Un-hai had become an adult. She was a warrior who knew how to compromise with reality and fight coldly. Now she had the role of leading the party. Many things have happened. His voice was different. A heavy bass. A cold expression. His arrogant eyes that looked down on everything. She was pleased but couldn't crumple. Randolph Briggseel had been her idol. However, he was already dead. Maybe he was revived through a demon's plot. It didn't matter if his appearance was the same. It was now customary to have doubts first. Captain Nim? One of the members asked Yu Un-hai as they stepped forward. They noticed that an unusual atmosphere had formed. The members who didn't know the relationship between those two or Rose's identity were confused. However, Yu Un-hai didn't hear their voices. She was sweating and trying to conceal the fact that her heart was beating wildly. Why are you here? How does Rose Nim? Why do you think? He asked. Yu Un-hai was confused. Rose was one of the Savior's children. The Savior saved Korea and soon disappeared. Only Roy and Rose remained. People held up his children as kings. The influence of the two dark elves in South Korea could be considered the best. It isn't possible. Yu Un-hai's body trembled. It was like being hit by lightning. She had considered it once in a while. The Savior hid his face. No one knew what he looked like. Yu Un-hai sometimes thought that the Savior was him. Randolph Briggseel might have appeared like that on purpose. But no matter how positive the thought was, it was unreasonable. There were similar but slightly different parts. It wasn't simply referring to his appearance. To be honest, the person called the Savior had a very atmosphere around him. Fear. There was something about him that touched their primitive instincts. Sometimes it was horrifying to see his indiscriminate slaughtering of creatures. Randolph Briggseel had a different atmosphere. And their capabilities were different. Although the leader of the Devil Hunters had been the strongest human, he wasn't at the level of the Savior. The Dark Elves, demons or creatures. The awakened, including Yu Un-hai, were convinced that the Savior was one of those existences. Even so, none of them said anything. The civilians had no power. They needed to have faith and hope to rebuild Korea. If he could make them stand up, then they wouldn't question the Savior's identity. It was a secret they would keep inside them forever. However, the captain of Devil Hunters had been a human. She believed he was a human. He was violent, but Yu Un-hai thought he was different from a demon. So far, demons and creatures had never compromised with humans. Korea had only one dungeon, but that was changed due to the invasion by other demons. The floors disappearing played a pivotal role. So the captain couldn't be the Savior. It was too far-fetched. Master, Savior? Yu Un-hai considered Rosa's words. But she just couldn't know. Her body shook and her eyes rapidly moved. If those two were the same person. It seems like Kim Yong-woo hasn't said anything. The man said, Kim Yong-woo? The guild master knew something? It sounded like he knew and was deliberately hiding it from them. The man had a cynical smile on his face as he spoke. I was the one who gave the warning that the demons would gather. The British leaders? Humans tend to hide their own dirty linen. By the way, it seemed like he had confirmed something as he asked Yu Un-hai. It looks like your growth is fine. Wasn't the training room quite helpful? Ah, flop. Yu Un-hai's legs weakened. Only 2 words, but they were decisive. Yu Un-hai and the Savior were the only ones who knew the meaning of those 2 words. The Savior said that Yu Un-hai would know everything after she became stronger. His words were implying that this was the time. You, an ally? She barely managed to open her mouth. It was natural to think that the Savior would be a friend. Yet she still felt anxious. She couldn't get rid of this anxiety that came from the deepest part of her heart. She was glad, but now everything was confusing. If he turned into the enemy, then nobody would be able to stop him. She thought that everything was playing into his hands. Are you a demon, Randolph Briggseel? The Savior wasn't a human. All the awakened were sure of it. There were some who believed he was an angel or a god, but that was also uncertain. When looking at the angels, the Savior definitely couldn't be one. No holy power could be felt from him at all. In contrast, a god? Yu Un-hai's belief in the gods was completely dead. She also ruled out the possibility that he was a god. Creatures. They were the puppets of demons. They were affected by demons. The rest, she hated to admit it, but there was only one option. There were a few awakened in Korea who thought the Savior was a demon. They didn't want to believe it. They self-rationalized it. More than anything else, the words wouldn't emerge from their mouths. Human faith was surprisingly easy to collapse. And once faith collapsed, they were likely to feel despair. In a world filled with despair, they tried to maintain a glimmer of hope. Everyone knew it. Now was the time to think about tomorrow and have hope. Thanks to that, Korea was in the process of recovery. Please. Yu Un-hai looked at him and swallowed her saliva. It was okay if he was a human. All his actions could be justified. But what if he was a demon? Everything he had done since the beginning would be different. And he would have had an agenda for raising Yu Un-hai. Her idol that she trusted in would turn into a betrayer. All his actions would need to be reconsidered. It certainly wasn't good. Soon he opened his mouth. That's right, Kwang. The members simultaneously pulled out their weapons. The conversation was translated through magic items so everyone understood the meaning of demon. Demon, a target that needed to be handled before the creatures. No, if the demon could be eliminated, then the creatures in the dungeon would naturally disappear. And, no matter the situation, they had to destroy the demons. Stop. Don't attack him. Yu Un-hai barely recovered and tried to stop the members. However, they were members picked from different countries. They hadn't originally followed Yu Un-hai. She was only temporarily the leader because she was the strongest. Due to this, they were able to move independently. But there are only 2 opponents. It can't be helped. Captain Yu Un-hai, how can we not fight? The 2 of them are suspicious, so did you deliberately lead us towards them? It isn't like that, never. Doubts started to form. Even if Yu Un-hai denied it, the eyes of the members started to gradually change. Then please stay out of this. We can't just let a demon get away after encountering them. They wanted to kill all demons and creatures. If the opponent appeared, then they would attack first. It seemed like humans and demons could never compromise. Power of heaven, enhanced strength, blessing of strength. The members used buff skills and rushed towards him. It was something that Yu Un-hai couldn't stop. She could only stay still. Yet he didn't seem threatened at all. A sardonic smile was on his face. I won't spare those who aim their swords at me, he declared. Soon, his words became reality. The elite were selected. The awakened that were praised as the world's best. They were raised as secret weapons. They knew how to fight. The awakened also knew how to fight against someone stronger than themselves. They would be able to endure in any situation in order to produce the best results. They were people designed to survive in even the most adverse conditions. Thanks to that, They didn't know defeat and only felt pride in their abilities. There were no opponents that they couldn't overcome over time, just like water eroding a rock. However, that was all wishful thinking in front of this opponent. Not rock, but harder than steel, they were facing a wall that they couldn't surpass. Cough. Death spread. There were those who couldn't even make a sound before dying. The thing they all had in common was that they ran towards the man with a weapon. The man was cruel. He really shed no blood or tears. He showed no mercy. One move would take a life. He didn't miss a single one of their movements. Still, he didn't show any reaction. His expression was just like he was playing with them. Pharma's arrows. There were only 3 people with weapons raised remaining. A female with the occupation of archer used a skill. All of the magic power in the surroundings gathered on the arrowhead. It burned violently and intensely. Accurate shot, a unique skill that anticipated the movements of the enemy. Soon, the arrow went flying through the air. Waruruk. However, that was also useless. The arrow was burned by a strong flame before even reaching the man's body. The awakened with the bow widened her eyes. It was the first time that this technique had been blocked. However, that panic only lasted for a short moment. She quickly calmed her mind and prepared for the next attack. No, she tried to prepare. She placed her hand on the bow. It was the last thing she remembered. Quaduk. Mysterious lightning popped out from the man. The lightning in the form of a dragon swallowed the woman and instantly turned her to ashes. It looked like a dragon eating its prey. Stop, stop now. Yu Hai shouted. 5 people had died in only 1 minute. If she didn't do anything, then the surviving members would die. She couldn't help but realize that. The man turned his head towards her. He looked interested. They're trying to kill me. What reason do I have to stop? It isn't fair. Why does fairness need to be involved in killing? His words were correct. In the current world, there was little room for fairness when it came to death. Those who thought about fairness would be buried in the ground. The good died quickly and the wicked survived. In this sense, Yu Hai was one of the few people remaining with a conscience. Isn't it too cruel that one mistake could cost them their lives? You have the capacity to show generosity. Yu Hai admitted it. He was the captain of devil hunters and the savior, along with the fact that he was a demon. The team members couldn't understand his skill. He sometimes showed signs of some moves that he used in the past. Thus, she couldn't escape the reality. Yu Hai rose from her spot. Armed with a steel mentality, she was determined to reduce the damage as much as possible. The past was the past. In a world where every minute and second counted, there wasn't much room to dwell in the past. If I show generosity, then what will you give me? An exchange. Yu Hai inwardly thought. He would do what he wanted to anyway. No one here could stop him. It was impossible, even if Edward and Yu Hai joined together. She didn't know if they could grab his collar. The strong had rights. However, he didn't use those rights. This was a chance. She held onto the desire to save her team members. I'll give you this piece. I obtained it through the training room. When he was the savior, he gave Yu Hai a ticket to enter the training room before he left. She was able to obtain an object from that room. Edward was the same. Just in case, she handed over both pieces to him. He politely received the pieces. His expression didn't change. This is something I let you hold for a while. It does not count as an exchange. Then what would you like? Actually, coming to this place. She was filled with resentment. Yu Hai grinded her teeth together. Come to think of it, why was he here? Only those who knew about it were involved. Even if he gave the information to the British government, he couldn't have known about their plan. Yet, he had been waiting in advance. It meant someone had handed him the information. If so, perhaps he was looking for Hope. Hope, are you going to take it? It seems you really are smart. Indeed, his goal was Hope, a bomb made by humans in order to wipe out the demons and creatures. Advanced creatures and demons couldn't tolerate a few nuclear bombs. There was an investigation about their relationship to magic power. Thus, the incorporation of magic items and cores made it more effective. There were also many who died through the self-sacrifice skill. All the magic power, holy power, and the dead were poured into Hope. Hope was an item that couldn't be recreated. He knew about the existence of Hope and planned from the beginning. Yu Hai bit her lip. She turned and glanced at Hope. Should she take her life to deal with him? She had no chance of winning. but to have hope taken away. I know what you are thinking. But you don't need to worry. My purpose is to kill all the other demons. She knew that the demons were split into factions and the relationships among them weren't good. But even if he used hope to get rid of them, he would still remain. She couldn't be assured until she knew of his true purpose. Then what will you do? I'm not greedy for Earth. He wasn't greedy for Earth after invading? What type of sophistry was this? If he wasn't greedy, then he shouldn't have come in the first place. Yoon-hai stared at him with disbelief. To be honest, right now she had no idea who Randolph Briggseel was. What was his true self? I will beat all the remaining Grand Dukes and return to the demon world as the devil. Earth is just the arena for our struggle. All the demons want the destruction of Earth except for me. Isn't this just bad luck? They had come to Earth for an entirely different reason. It was absurd, yes. However, he didn't deny it. I can't believe it. You sound different from other demons. Then why did you kill my team members? You must have been able to spare them. He laughed. Don't misunderstand. I am a demon. Don't imagine some quality of goodness that I don't have. Unlike other demons, I am not interested in the destruction of the Earth. Why should I not kill those who go against me? Then why are the other demons? Demons have hated humans for a long time. They envy the freedom of your short lives and the incessant changes. I don't have such strong feelings against Earth, but I am still a demon. Didn't you pretend to be human? You led devil hunters. How could you do that if you hate humans? I wanted to give humans strength. Then, I would use you for my own purpose. He took one step closer. He was silent for a moment before continuing. I am a solitary demon. Unlike other Grand Dukes, I don't have a faction. While they are focused on short-term goals, I have no choice but to make a long-term investment. In that sense, humans are very useful. I was sure that human swords would eventually reach the necks of other demons. Dubuk. The sound of his footsteps were exceptionally loud. Yoon-hai took a step back and asked through cracked lips. The human potential surpasses that of demons. I hate to admit it, but it is true. However, the attacks of the demons would be too fierce in the beginning. I kept you from them, gave you a hard time, and increased your experience. I also imitated human behavior to lead you. Of course, I hadn't expected other demons to invade my territory while I was away. Perhaps, that was it. South Korea's dungeon. I am Randolph Briggseel. I am a demon, one of the 4 Grand Dukes, ruler of the underground world, dungeon master. There were more. The leader of devil hunters. Savior. Those were other words that could represent him. He didn't bring it up because Yoon-hai already knew. Then, he spoke again with an arrogant expression. I am your hope. Chapter 219 to 220. Melee. There was evil, but not all evil was the same. There was a difference in intensities. I was evil. However, the degree of evil depended on my choices. I chose to destroy the other demons. I had no desire for Earth since my dream was to win over the Grand Dukes and return to the demon world as the devil. I would laugh loudly as I welcomed everyone. Compared to that, I felt no desire to conquer a place like Earth. There was also the promise with the 72 gods. So, they could rest assured. Once I became the winner, Earth would be safe. Yoon-hai was troubled. But it wasn't an exaggeration to say that she had already come to a conclusion. There was no better choice besides me. They wouldn't be able to break through the other demons on their own. Angels? They also killed humans. I looked at her with relaxed eyes. In addition, there was hope. It was contained in a large iron box. The appearance didn't match its name. I opened mind's eye. Name. Hope. Legend. Description. A one-time disposable item. A bomb filled with the hope of humanity. It is a mixture of skills, cores and self-sacrifice. Be careful. It will cause a huge explosion that will erase everything it touches. Nature friendly. There are no side effects. Asterisk asterisk if the total of stamina, strength and intelligence is less than 250, there is a 100% chance of disappearing. Asterisk asterisk if the total of stamina, strength and intelligence is between 250 to 260, there is a 80% chance of disappearing. Asterisk asterisk if the total of stamina, strength and intelligence is between 260 to 270, there is a 60% chance of disappearing. Asterisk asterisk if the total of stamina, strength and intelligence is between 270 to 280, there is a 40% chance of disappearing. Asterisk asterisk if the total of stamina, strength and intelligence is between 280 to 290, there is a 20% chance of disappearing. Asterisk asterisk if the total of stamina, strength and intelligence is over 290, then the effects are unknown. Strength, stamina and intelligence were all defensive stats. Strength was a little bit different. However, the efficiency of hope changed depending on every increase of 10 points. For me, the total of those three stats had already surpassed 290. I didn't know what would happen, but I wouldn't disappear. The Grand Dukes also wouldn't receive a significant blow. Humans have managed to create this type of thing. I couldn't help feeling surprised. A legend rating. The result of human desperation was quite brilliant. Self-sacrifice was a skill where the person literally sacrificed themselves. If it was used several times, then it was impossible for the item to have a low rating. I touched my jaw. It seemed to be a fairly powerful weapon. It wouldn't be very effective against strong or transcendent beings, but the bomb would reduce the enemy troops. Millions of creatures were gathered here, and most of them belonged to other demons. If it was used at the appropriate time, then many creatures could be killed. Rose will guide you to a place to install the bomb. Once the installation is complete, escape and wait for my signal. Installing it in the center of Greenwich Observatory was good but not very effective. It was better to drop it in the middle of the battlefield. I didn't wait for Yu Eun-hai's decision. Even if she made the wrong decision, it wasn't easy to change the story. Kim Yong-woo. He deliberately kept his mouth shut. The Guild Master of Heaven's Will. He had a quick head that always thought about the benefits. He kept his mouth shut despite knowing my identity. He probably didn't want to make a big mess. The status of devil hunters would have fallen and Korea would have become enveloped in turmoil. It was a situation where keeping his mouth shut was more advantageous. I turned around slowly. Anyway, I had achieved all my goals for coming here. I secured the pieces from the training room. I also confirmed Yu Eun-hai and Edward's growth. It was all very satisfying. In particular, the growth of Yu Eun-hai and Edward was very steep. It was more than twice as fast as it was in my previous life. In the near future, demons would be reluctant to face both of them. I can't finish everything in this fight. It would take a little bit longer. I could handle things during the turmoil, but pushing myself too much might cause a backlash. First, I smiled coldly while maintaining my pace. The battlefield would be changed. As long as hope was as good as I thought it was. If it successfully exploded, then a very interesting scene would be produced. Hundreds of thousands of creatures were flocking. They pressed against Ariel Diablo's army. But things weren't progressing quickly. Flash, white light was coming from the Silver Knights. That light connected the Silver Knights. They shared strength, damage and skills. It was great mountains, epic. When thinking about it simply, it meant it was possible to deal a shock to all the Silver Knights. However, the Silver Knights had excellent individual abilities. They were even able to fight against high-class creatures. Upa had an absolute advantage in the number of creatures. Ariel Diablo's demons were also unbelievable. They followed her like she was a queen. They all acted like knights. They never neglected their training. Thanks to that, they were able to continue fighting despite the numbers disadvantage. Damn cancer, I will stop this. Upa was furious. He thought it was possible to win through overwhelming numbers, but that wasn't the case. It was also hard to concentrate on fighting with the angels around them. Upa Bulanon, if you don't watch your words, then your mouth will be torn out. Ariel wore armor and a weapon made from the bones of a Balrog. A Balrog was a high-class LV5 creature, so it was considered one of the best. The resistance to magic power embedded in those bones was beyond imagination. It had the ability to invalidate quite a few skills. In a simple one-to-one confrontation, Ariel Diablo had the slight advantage. It played a big role in arousing Upa's anger. Upa spread his arms wide. A number of black spheres rose from his arms. The black spheres were black holes that sucked in everything around them. He gathered them together into one huge black hole. The black hole had a very strong pulling force that didn't distinguish between friends and foes. But Upa didn't care. He needed to dispose of them. Ariel's expression changed subtly. She instinctively perceived the danger in this skill. It wouldn't leave anything alive. Abyss Sword. The patented skill of Ariel Diablo. Her sword was surrounded by chaos. Ariel was threatened by Upa's skill, but she showed no intention of avoiding it. She was going to tear him apart piece by piece. She didn't think that the black hole could stop the Abyss sword. Ariel, Diablo and Upa collided in the air. Huang. Pandemonium frowned. The situation was grave. The movements of the angels were strange. We are being herded. The angels were driving the creatures with the ark. He didn't notice at first, but it became clear as time passed. Do they want a melee? Ariel, Diablo and Upa Bulanon were engaging in battle near the ark. Pandemonium had no intention of intervening in their fight. It would be good for him if they fought. If the damage to both of them was great, then he could get rid of both of them. But this plan was broken due to the interruption of the angels. It seemed like everyone was fighting near the ark. Or there were some other intentions. Sururic. It was at that moment. Dozens of shadows gathered around Pandemonium. Did the mission fail? Sururic. The shadows didn't speak. Instead, they only talked using subtle movements. Failure. He clicked his tongue. They were shadows created by Pandemonium himself. Shadow hunters. He created them to assassinate demons and creatures. He had sent 3,000 of them and they looked like they had been in a violent fight. They weren't enough to catch the cherub. A cherub was the second-ranked angel in the upper hierarchy. He had experienced this once in the demon world. They had amazing powers. There were 3,000 shadow hunters, yet it still ended in failure. Suruk. The shadow hunters couldn't help shaking after seeing Pandemonium's disappointment. You failed to hunt the cherub, but did you get the throne's angel? Talk. Pandemonium clapped his hands. A throne's angel was a high-ranking angel. It was lower than the cherub, but it was better than nothing. The throne's angel is called Opinion. Opinion was a throne's angel who fell to earth, and Pandemonium knew a little bit about him. Among the angels, he was someone who had a strong leadership ability. His eyes that watched the battlefield were excellent, and he did the work of 10 commanders. He was killed. In other words, killing Opinion would crack the system between angels. It wasn't a total failure. Half of it was a success. Perhaps this result was better than assassinating a cherub. It was a different story. It was time to move. Tell all the creatures. Move to the ark. Let the angels know how difficult a melee battle is. Melee combat wasn't something that everyone was capable of. Could they keep their heads and solve complex situations? Pandemonium had a lot of experience. He was confident. If Opinion was dead, then he could win this battle without much damage. And it might not be impossible to hunt Upa and Ariel. He tried to avoid direct combat with them, but it all depended on the circumstances. Going to the demon world was important, but he also had to eliminate competitors here. Randolph Briggseel, you should be careful. Pandemonium didn't release his tension. Sururic. In response to Pandemonium's movement, the shadow hunters melted into the ground. I climbed on top of Greenwich Observatory. It was evening with a full moon. The battle lasted a few days. I placed creatures in Greenwich Observatory. The number itself wasn't much and there weren't any high-quality creatures, but the combination was good. There were 500 saber tigers and 500 orc variants, with trolls and ogres mixed in moderately. And I also added doppelgangers. They can only copy the appearance, but it doesn't matter in a situation like this. Doppelgangers could change their appearance to look like the opponents. Although it wasn't a strong intermediate creature, the utilization rate was excellent. In this situation, their uses as scammers would shine even more. I had hidden 300 doppelgangers in the basement of the Greenwich Observatory. All of them transformed into Death Knights. I also mixed in 30 real Death Knights among them. Thus, a good Death Knight unit was completed. There is no need to increase the damage. They were just a formality. I would use them to play the opponents. Despite not participating in the battle, I would be able to show off some influence. Melee. It was already the second day. Everyone was moving around the ark. Ariel, Upa, Pandemonium and the angels were engaged in a bloody feast. Before they noticed something suspicious, I needed them to look at me. It was too early to use hope. The moment the winner is decided, just when they think everything is over, I will be the one to laugh last. Although I could see the effect of the item through mind's eye, it still wasn't clear how strong hope was. So, I needed to make moves to minimize the risk. Waiting. Patience was something I was good at. How interesting. I turned around. Oswin had finished all the preparations. Your Majesty, if you tell me then Oswin will destroy all your enemies. Oswin declared in a vigorous voice. I could feel his sincerity. He followed me for only one reason. I saved him and dealt a blow to the Hell Monarch. I laughed. You sound like Maxium. Yes. Have you received any contact from Maxium? He has entered the dungeons of 2 demons of Upa's faction. Things are going well. Oswin shrugged. It is thanks to the powerful reinforcement that your Majesty gave him. Originally, Maxium's role was to hinder Upa. Now he was given a new mission, to occupy dungeons. I also refilled his troops. The high-class Mago and Bone Dragons, as well as skeleton soldiers. I gave him all the high-class creatures that I didn't use to catch Gustarte. It was in order to create more confusion in the melee fight. Upa will be distracted while fighting Ariel. If this was a normal situation, many of the troops would have left after hearing the news. However, Upa was currently waging a war against Ariel. He couldn't afford that right now. Thanks to that, the task of occupying the dungeons was proceeding smoothly. It didn't matter if it was an important stronghold or the dungeon of a low-ranking demon. All that mattered was getting as many dungeons as possible. That alone was enough. I was satisfied with that. I was doing several things at the same time and everything was going as I wanted. Your Majesty, whose side do you like? Ariel Diablo, Upa Bullanon or Pandemonium? Or do you want to take the side of the angels? Right now, everyone was an enemy. The tacit agreement had been broken. Once the fire was set, nothing could stop it until the result was seen. The answer is obvious. I pulled out my sword. Then I said, all who oppose me are my enemies. Quang, Quang, Hying, Wu, all the creatures were crying out. The doppelgangers that weren't really Death Knights simultaneously pulled out their swords. It was a suitable show. I would ensure that we were noticed. Let's go. Waruruk. Pride's flames emerged. The first ones that aimed at me were the angels. Despite the angels rushing, I stayed still. I didn't want to be forced to move my hands. Oswin. Yes, Your Majesty. Who do you think will win? A large ship. Upa and Ariel were engaged in a bloody battle near it. It was a fight that showed no signs of ending. Upa, isn't Ariel slightly dominant? A war isn't won with only one strong person. Oswin was a commander in the underground world. Despite regaining himself, that experience still seemed intact. I tapped a finger against my forehead. In the one-to-one fight between Upa and Ariel, the one that was dominating was Ariel. If this continued, then the gap would keep growing. On the other hand, in the confrontation between demons and creatures, Upa was leading. Ariel only brought a few elites, so her numbers were too few. The absolute number advantage was inevitable. The gap between Ariel and Upa would keep on widening. In particular, the Silver Knights, they were showing a great performance, but I used mind's eye to study their skills. They will fall at the same time. This is the end. Giant Mountains, epic, was certainly a good skill, but it had the disadvantage of all of them collapsing at the same time once all the stamina was consumed. Little by little, gaps were forming and more troops were required to fill that vacancy. What about the fight between Pandemonium and the Angels? Pandemonium will win. His ability in melee combat is excellent. I agreed. The longest surviving demon, a person who mastered demonic magic. That was Pandemonium. He was used to situations like this. In contrast, the Angels were forced on the defensive. They were being grinded down. What do you think Pandemonium will do once he wins? He will either deal with both or attach himself to Upa. Pandemonium and Upa have similar tendencies. Upa and Pandemonium instinctively knew one thing. Ariel Diablo's strength. In my previous life, she was the winner. She survived until the very end. Then we will have to help Ariel Diablo. Weren't you aiming for that from the beginning? In this battlefield, at least one of them should be eliminated. I was sure of that. But it was a little bit difficult because it was Ariel Diablo. She had the honor of complete victory in my previous life. Personally, I hoped that the final contest would be against her. It would be a neat ending. In that sense, Upa and Pandemonium were tricky. So it might be easier to clean them up first. My army was small, but it would be enough. I would give Ariel Diablo a chance to turn the situation. My first action was the most important. Upa, Pandemonium, the result would be completely different depending on who I aimed for. Aim at Upa. Hash isn't a child that will break that easily. Isn't that a problem with the Angel's command system? That won't be a problem. Right now, Hash has a complete understanding of melee combat. Aren't you overestimating him? Your Majesty, Tashmil has arrived. She is currently next to Hash. I frowned. I didn't understand Oswin's words for a moment. Tashmil is corrupted. How can the angels fail to notice that? She isn't right next to him. She is following from a distance and giving advice. It isn't hard for her to use the angel system to convey a message. And, doesn't Hash follow Tashmil very well? He is like a child trying to look good in front of his mother. It will make a difference. Of course, the outcome won't change much, but the angels will be able to deal a bigger blow. It was convincing. Anyway, Oswin was better than me when it came to strategies on the battlefield. I could admit this fact. I had always acted alone in my previous life. I nodded and said, okay, attack Upa. I concluded, if the angels were motivated to stop pandemonium, then I had some time. In the meantime, I would help Ariel take care of Upa. Chapters 221 to 242. Chapter 221 to 222. Melee. Just in case of an angel attack, Upa had left many creatures in the rear. There was a chance he might be surrounded by Ariel's troops and the angels. So he built a wall of creatures. I decided to hit the weakest spot. Even a solid wall would collapse if there was a gap. The first one that stood out was Groggy. Groggy Inpier. He was one of Upa's demons who loved succubi. His one accomplishment was being able to summon the succubus queen. Thousands of succubi were flying in the sky. Originally succubi were intermediate 4LV creatures. However, they were enhanced due to the influence of the succubus queen. I set the 30 real death knights here. The remaining 300 death knights, that were actually doppelgangers, were placed at the rear as a screen. They wouldn't be that much help in this fight anyway. They were just there to give a sense of pressure. The succubi turned towards me. Groggy, who was touching the succubus queen's chest, stared at me. Ha, Grand Duke Randolph Brigzeal. Aren't you protecting the castle? Stepping outside the castle is too dangerous for you. His tone was full of ridicule. Soon, Groggy and the succubus queen descended from the sky. This place looks good, I replied leisurely. Groggy's smile widened further. Hoo-hoo. Then watch quietly. There is no place for you on this battlefield. If I don't have a place, then I should make it. Oswin. Oswin briefly bowed his head. Yes, Your Majesty. Can you get rid of the guy in front of you? It is the easiest thing to do. Instead, please take care of the succubus queen. Isn't it usually the other way around? I think this can save a lot of time. Oswin said with a smirk. Indeed, Groggy Inpier was easy to kill. I would be able to leave him to Oswin. Believing in your creatures, this is a surprise. Randolph Brigzeal, if you interfere, then I will kill you here. I clicked my tongue. First and foremost, cut off his tongue. That voice is disgusting. Yes, Your Majesty. Kill him. Groggy Inpier's face was red due to our attitude. The battle had already been going on for a few days. It was natural to get excited about small things. I disapprove of you having the title of Grand Duke. The only true Grand Duke is Upa. Thousands of succubi flew at me in a flash. The bat wings filled the sky. Evening. The full moon further strengthened the succubi. They were similar to wolf-type creatures. There was also the influence of the succubus queen. She looked like a normal succubus but was bigger. In short, the first thing I need to do is subdue the succubus queen. Wrath and the Emperor's Sword. The succubus queen had a very beautiful appearance. Violet hair and seductive eyes. Her red lips were swollen like they would burst. She had a shapely waist and protruding buttocks that were revealed by tight leather clothes, making any man want to jump on her. Mind's Eye has discovered Temptation of Instincts, Epic. High Intelligence, 111, Calibration has succeeded in defending against 100%. The skill was caught. It was entirely useless. Seduction skills didn't work on me. This is the first time I've seen a succubus queen. It was a bit of a novelty. Succubus queen. I had only seen it in books, so this was my first actual experience with one. I was told that the succubus queen could attract men and women due to her looks. In that sense, Groggy was great. How much love did he have for succubi that he summoned a queen? No, maybe it was a direct birth. A high-class creature. I used Mind's Eye. Name. Succubus Queen, Dala. Stats. Strength 99, Intelligence 91. Agility 97, Stamina 82. Magic Power 105. Potential. 474 474. Uniqueness. Succubus Queen. She has inherited the name of Dala, the legendary succubus queen. Has a strong protection blessing. Every succubus in the vicinity will be affected by her. Skill. Dala's protection. Epic. Temptation of instinct. Epic. Queen's anger. Epic. Festival of the whip. Epic. Indeed, she was strong among the high-class creatures. She was between a high-class 3 LV and 4 LV creature. A creature that received Upa's recognition. It was the reason they were the only ones in such a wide space. It was unfortunate that I was here. Then one more message popped up. Dala's protection, Epic, has encountered power of domination, Epic. Power of domination will offset 64.4% of Dala's protection. Dala's protection has become very weak. I smirked. The power of domination had various effects, and it seemed to exert itself on a wide area skill. It wasn't bad. Dala's protection had been a light imposition. I wanted to finish this quickly. However, there was no need to overdo things. Despite being weakened, the succubi were still moderately strong intermediate creatures. Their numbers weren't enough to reverse the situation. Groggy's expression became determined. However, the fight had already begun. Then I will teach you something, demon. Oswin held 6 swords with his 6 hands. They were excellent swords. They were all directly made by Oswin. He was a blacksmith good enough to create the 7 Sins set. He absolutely never made half-hearted things. Oswin desperately made the weapons. That was Oswin's pride. The succubus queen grabbed a whip. I stared into her eyes and thought, an existence in a book. This isn't your place. At first she was a novelty. That was all. A few thousand. A succubus queen had appeared in the world after a few thousand years. However, I would return the succubus queen to the storybooks once again. The wall created by Upa was surprisingly poor. Was he not worried? Or the error might be because he was focused on Ariel Diablo. I only joined briefly and there was already a hole. It wasn't surprising, so I didn't care. We were enemies from the beginning. I am not gentlemanly enough to be kind to the enemy. I was a little better than other demons. There was no point in feeling resentment towards me. At any rate, this was a perfect opportunity to defeat a Grand Duke with no risk. I would borrow Ariel Diablo's hands to do so. I just needed to pierce through Upa's blind spot. Blind spot. I was currently located in his blind spot. All of Upa's nerves were completely focused on Ariel Diablo, so he couldn't easily move even if he heard the news. Even if he did move, the timing would need to be perfect. It was because Ariel Diablo couldn't be left out. He had no choice but to keep fighting her. That was Upa's fate. This is enough. I had killed 3 of Upa's demons. I also received some damage. A large majority of my creatures were lost. This was enough for now. There was a gap and it was Ariel Diablo's job to find this gap. I had no reason to care anymore. Now what do we do, Your Majesty? Oswin asked while wiping his brow. Actually, he was an undead, so he was just pretending to be sweating. I put away wrath and the Emperor's sword before turning away. You have worked hard. The doppelgangers that have turned into Death Knights, it is enough if they just wander around without fighting. I will watch Upa. I will return to the castle. Your Majesty, is that okay? Right now there are no loyal followers of Your Majesty in the castle. Oswin joked around. I gave a moderate reply. Don't meddle. I will go back and look at the situation. If you need anything then come and find me. Oswin nodded his head. Yes, I will lead the rest of the creatures. His task was decided. I started moving. I soon assimilated with the wind and disappeared. I had a reason for returning to the castle. It was to see the pieces. And I needed to find the timing to launch Hope. Hope wouldn't explode unless I instructed it to. In order to get the timing accurate, it was better to watch from the castle since it was slightly away from the battle. I needed to understand the whole context to get the best timing. Underneath the castle, there was a secret room hidden. I could see all the areas of the castle from here. Thousands of crystal balls were intricately linked. It is a device that instantaneously boosts all the magic power in the castle. Pandemonium also won't be able to find me here. This was one of the items belonging to the Hell Monarch. A device that caused an enormous amount of magic power amplification. Pandemonium might be experienced in magic, but he wouldn't be able to find the Hell Monarch's device. I constantly monitored the situation in the castle using dozens of crystal balls. I looked into the crystal balls as I pulled out 5 pieces from the training room. The advanced training room. The pieces were tokens obtained from clearing the room. Chrisley, Tashmal, Yoon-hai and Edward had entered the advanced training room. If so, there should only be 4 pieces. However, I already had 5. One was used by Hash. That's right. The method I used to mature Hash in a short amount of time was the advanced training room. The body didn't age in the training room, but it was possible for the spirit to grow. The flesh wasn't grown, but he could be able to think like a reasonable adult. If not, I wouldn't have allowed him to go to the angel's sacred zone. Even if he was a cherub, there was a possibility that he would be influenced by the other angels. However, that worry decreased after his spirit grew to some extent. Why did the Hell Monarch prepare this? I had that question from the beginning. He was close to perfect, yet he prepared something like this. I was curious about the reason it was placed among his treasures. There were many other legendary items, so this one was conspicuous. It wasn't intended to grow his subordinates. I also wondered why only 5 people could enter. There were also the pieces given after they left the room safely. I strongly sensed that something would happen once all the pieces were gathered. I was going to check it now. I placed the 5 pieces on the ground. But I didn't have a chance to put them together. I placed the pieces back into my magic bag. A guest. I felt indications that there were many creatures present. It was like they were prowling around looking for someone. They suddenly appeared. They didn't seem to have any good intentions. I shook my head and exited. It seemed like I needed to welcome these guests. This place wasn't for them. Shadows rose from the ground. It was ironic that shadows existed in the dark underground. The shadows filled the underground space. They seemed to get closer. Soon all the shadows started to gradually change. They appeared to look like me. Doppelganger? I tilted my head to the side. It was the first time I had seen such creatures. I had never heard of a creature that looked like a shadow and turned into the opponent like a doppelganger. I opened mind's eye. Name: Shadow Hunter. Uniqueness: a shadow that turns into the opponent. Created by Pandemonium. The abilities when transformed will depend on the opponent. They are specialized creatures. There is a strong desire to destroy the target they had changed into. On the contrary, the opponent will be helpless. Skill: Imitation, X Epic. A designated task. In other words, a creature that specialized in assassination. They were like a curse designed to kill one target. Pandemonium made something interesting. I couldn't see their stats. It meant there was a large variation in their stats. But they couldn't copy my capabilities. If that was possible, Pandemonium would have already won the game. After a while, there were only a dozen creatures that resembled me. It was a pretty funny situation. My mouth opened. I am familiar with fighting myself. I didn't feel panicked. I had already fought against myself many times due to the Tree of Origin. There was no need to be nervous about things that were merely imitations. There were many of them, but I just shrugged it off. Pandemonium. He intends to catch me. A formidable person. In this situation, he had prepared assassins. The only thing? It wouldn't be easy, but it was worth a try. The shadow hunters that looked exactly like me moved their hands. It seemed like not only could they copy my appearance, but they could also use my weapons. I was curious to see who would win in the confrontation between the real one and the imitations. The shadow hunters' moves were good. But they were also different from me. The difference in depth was too much. I was in the transcendent realm, so they couldn't perfectly imitate me. It seemed like the shadow hunters couldn't enter the realm of transcendence. But there are a lot of them. Chang. Our swords clashed. Zhejiang. There was a crack in the Emperor's sword that the shadow hunter was holding. Naturally, it couldn't win against the original. Originally, the Emperor's sword couldn't break, but the copy was smashed. The limits of imitation. There was no depth. It was nothing more than replicating the outside. The skills they used were similar, but that was it. I couldn't help laughing while looking at them. However, there were as many as 10,000 creatures. They were equivalent to advanced 1LV creatures. It would be a little bit arduous. They weren't low, but advanced grade creatures. They wouldn't die with one strike. I needed to apply my strength when dealing with each one. It was enough to contend with a transcendent being. If this was possible, then the angels would have defeated the demons in my previous life. The Seraphim Camiel. He was like a small planet. Tisk. I clicked my tongue. I had consumed a lot of magic power dealing with Upa's demons on the battlefield. It would be strange to kill 3 demons in a short amount of time without taking any damage. Now I needed to fight in this state. Should I call reinforcements? They would be of some use. Yi could pass my instructions on to them. However, I shook my head. It was possible that my creatures wouldn't be able to escape the explosion in time if I called them. My life was important, but I also needed to look at the bigger picture. This was a trap prepared by Pandemonium. Perhaps it wasn't the only one. I felt a thrill at the thought of crushing his plans alone. I will try it. Waruruk. Pride's flames started burning everywhere. An unquenchable flame swallowed up the dark shadows. Warwick. The Shadow Hunters used Pride's flames, but they couldn't beat the original. Pride was one of the 7 sins. It was a fire that no one could imitate. Kururung. Lightning God came out. It swept the area with a huge roar. I freely released Lightning God. I couldn't pay attention to every move. I hope that power of domination is invoked. I had one more great weapon. The power of domination. It was a skill with a very low probability to subdue the opponent. I wondered if it would work on the shadows, but there was no reason for it not to. If it worked, then I would be able to fight alone against so many creatures. Even without it, I alone might be enough. Dark Sword. Ying, Wrath and the Emperor's sword were surrounded by darkness. At the same time, the Shadow Hunters tinged their swords with a red aura. Hope had finished being installed. Now it was time to quickly retreat. Their chances of survival would increase if they got as far as possible. But, Yu Hai abruptly stopped. Nuna? Edward asked with confusion. The only members left of the team carrying hope were Yu Hai, Edward, Kim Yura and Kim Minji. Yu Hai spoke with difficulty. I'm going back. Where? Perhaps. Yes. I need to confirm it with both eyes. Are you crazy? Why are you going back there? Nuna can't do anything. I don't know about later, but right now. Edward swallowed his final words. That's right. With Yu Hai's abilities, she wouldn't be able to do anything. It might be possible after a few years or a few decades. However, going right now would just cause her death. Does he really have no feelings? When he was in Devil Hunters, he was cold, but I clearly saw some moments of warmth. Really, I need to make sure that he is really a demon. For the future of humanity. If he was the last hope, Yu Hai felt obliged to discover his true face. If Randolph Brigzeal was similar to other demons, then it might be the worst choice. However, Edward showed extreme opposition. Nuna, you can't go. That man, no, that demon used us. Do you really think so? Originally I was so hopeless that I was cleaning toilets. I was just like a frail child before death. Heaven's will has suffered and Korea was almost destroyed many times. But what was the end result? Nuna, why is Nuna like this? I heard it. He wanted us to become stronger so that we would someday strike at the demons' necks. He just saw our potential. If Nuna didn't have any potential, then do you think he would have saved us? He knew it from the beginning. The danger that humanity would face. So he needed to gather people like us. If he is like other demons, then why did he move at all? Didn't he become the savior to help us? Why did he collect the scattered people to summon the Giran? So now he is a good demon? No. He killed the other team members in the blink of an eye. He needed no reason to use his sword. A cultural difference. Haven't we suffered thanks to other demons? They are cruel and vicious. Still, he feels different from the other demons. Clearly, I can't express it well. Who? Edward sighed deeply. It was severe. Nothing he said would work. Yu Hai's remarks were just sophistry that she wanted to believe in. The result wouldn't be good if he allowed it. He needed to draw a clear line. Edward pulled out his greatsword. It was time to use force to protect his beloved Nuna. If she went back, then she would clearly die. If you want to go, then step on me. I won't send you to that place to die. Edward, I don't want to do this. But, Hope has already left our hands. We can discuss him later after Hope gets rid of other demons. If Nuna dies, then humanity will suffer a great loss. Edward was logical. He wasn't a young child. But there was a complex expression on Yu Hai's face. Even so, she was stubborn. Suk. Yu Hai quietly pulled out her sword. A gleaming sword was soon revealed. The two of them had similar capabilities. So far, Yu Un-hai still had the advantage. However, Yu Un-hai's mental state wasn't normal right now, so no one knew what would happen. Kim Yura and Kim Min-ji were just watching the confrontation with dark expressions. However, they couldn't tell them the truth. All they could do was pray that this fight would end safely. I shook my head. The flow of magic power started to reverse. I was dizzy for a moment. It felt like my entire body was empty because I had used too much magic power. It is still a success. A one-on-one confrontation. I had broken the trap prepared by Pandemonium. Thanks to that, my body reached the limit, but it wasn't enough to make me fall. The shadow hunters disappeared as soon as they died. There was nothing left in the surroundings. I am glad for the Conqueror's Ring. It was an item that helped speed up the recovery of my magic power. Even now, magic power was quickly being restored. If I was given a day and a half, then a significant portion of it would be recovered. I wasn't in a big hurry. I had suffered like this despite not facing strong creatures due to my greed. In order to capture Gustarte and attack Upa's dungeons, I brought only a minimum of troops with me. Of course, I was stubborn about facing the shadow hunters alone, but there was no regret. I had achieved a good result. I was very invigorated. Swee. But after some time, I scowled. I noticed that the sound of the wind flowing through the underground passage changed subtly. I know that I'm not alone. How did they find me? Pandemonium knows about this place. He was just pretending not to know. I thought bitterly. It seemed like I had underestimated Pandemonium too much. He was the one who mastered the essence of demonic magic. He pierced through the magic of the Hell Monarch. However, he probably pretended not to know. He had been waiting until I came here alone. It is too demanding. Although I could get through this wall, it might not be possible if Pandemonium knew about this place. It was because Hope was here. There was a chance that Pandemonium knew about the exact usage of this place. I could only pray that he was ignorant about Hope. Hope was too good to give up. I also had to consider the possibility of Hope entering Pandemonium's hands. It can't be helped. Soon puppet demons emerged. There were 12 of them. Originally, they were Okuyo's vassals, but they lost themselves and became Pandemonium's limbs. Sururik. Approximately 1,000 shadow hunters joined. Demons? I shook my head. This seemed to be a tricky fight. There was dense smoke. Yu Un-hai saw that there were already many changes when arriving back at Greenwich Observatory. Bodies were scattered all over the place, with traces of fire. Where? Yu Un-hai didn't stop walking. She was only looking for one thing. The person who raised her and led the group in the past. He called himself a demon, but it was still unbelievable. She had thought this while walking through the battlefield. It was formidable. Demons and angels were fighting each other in one place. The creatures were also fighting amongst themselves. One wrong move meant not even a bone would remain. Not here. Still, Yu Un-hai didn't give up. She looked around the battlefield as much as possible and was sure that he wasn't here. Then where was he? She infiltrated Greenwich Observatory. Maybe he was preparing for Hope to explode. She wasn't far from the place where Hope was installed. There were a few dangerous situations, but she fortunately managed to enter the underground area. A rotten smell soon seeped into her nose. What is this smell? The smell became worse as she continued walking. Yu Un-hai grabbed her nose without knowing it. Soon, she was forced to stop. The underground area was half destroyed. Something obviously happened. It had been fine when she came here before. Something had happened in the meantime. It wasn't completely collapsed so she could enter. Right away, she was able to find the corpses of demons. Other demons. There were signs of a battle. Yu Un-hai kept on moving. And after a while, Yu Un-hai's eyes widened as she discovered something. Ah,